His Sexy Mountain Cowboy. Rouge River Mountain Men, Book 2. Written by L. Lauren. Chapter 1. Lawrence Van Rensselaer stepped out of his sleek, modern sedan, gripping the doorframe and digging the heel of his jet-black loafers into the asphalt parking lot. He closed the door behind him and twirled his keys in his hand, squeezing them as he approached a quiet office building. Soft fingers perched designer sunglasses on the top of his head, matting down wild dark curls. He yanked open the tinted glass door to a private office and stepped inside, adjusting his collar as he approached the receptionist's desk. "Hello there," a young woman greeted him with sparkling eyes and a smiling face. "What can I do for you?" "I have an appointment at 1 o'clock with Mr. Campbell." Lawrence lifted dark eyebrows. "Oh? You're Mr. Van Rensselaer," she overpronounced each syllable, and Lawrence twitched. His lips curled. "Yes. I am kind of in a rush. Is he available right now?" "Let me check. If you would like, you can take a seat." She motioned to a table filled with refreshments and a collection of unoccupied striped chairs. "No, thank you." Lawrence hooked his thumbs in his pockets as the woman's smile faltered. She tapped Mr. Campbell's phone number into an office telephone and put the receiver to her ear. "Mr. Campbell? Yeah, hi, I have your 1 o'clock appointment available for you." She paused, chewing her bottom lip and nodding. Yeah, of course. Okay, sure, I'll let him know." She ended the call, and the receiver chimed when she placed it back in its cradle. "Well?" Lawrence prompted. "He's on his way out here right now. He'll escort you to his office." "Thank you." Lawrence posted himself at the receptionist's desk until an older gentleman emerged from a shallow hallway, approaching Lawrence with an extended hand. "Mr. Van Rensselaer." The man smiled, giving Lawrence a firm handshake. "Mr. Campbell. Let's go back to my office. I printed a map of the land for us to look at." Mr. Campbell rubbed Lawrence's shoulders and led him down the hall, ushering the younger man into his office. "Please take a seat." "Of course. Thank you." Lawrence pressed his hand into his torso as he sat down in front of Mr. Campbell's desk. A map printout stretched over the man's desk, weighed down at the corners with heavy objects. "Great, so let's talk about what all of this means before I get down to what we can and can't do with the land you purchased." Mr. Campbell explained the layout of the map, pointing out obstructions and other features of the land. He circled problem areas and 2 natural springs before setting his pen down and lacing his fat fingers together. "It was a good purchase." "A damn good purchase," Lawrence corrected. A sly smile spread over his face. "Now, did you have any idea of what you wanted to do with it? Do you think vacation homes would work there?" "My initial thought was apartments or condominiums. I believe a vacation resort would work there. There is plenty of space, and with 2 natural springs and a beautiful view, you can command a high price from your guests." Lawrence nodded. "Perfect. So, where do we go from here? Have you seen the land yet?" "Actually, no. I haven't." "Then, I believe our next step is getting a good look at the dirt you purchased and make sure it's ready for a new build." "Okay," Lawrence drawled. "Then I will do that." "And what will you be doing?" He lifted his eyebrows. "Well, I'm going to make sure we're all set to break ground when you're ready. I'm going to talk to an architect and get some building plans while reviewing the zoning and ordinances for the county. And of course, any other administrative tasks that need to be done. I want to make this project easy and painless for you." Mr. Campbell smiled. "All right." Lawrence nodded. "Good. Well then, I guess I am taking a little trip to the mountains." "I guess you are." Lawrence stood up, adjusting his tie and blazer. He shook Mr. Campbell's hand again. "Thank you for your time." "You're very welcome. I've worked for your father for 30 years on his land acquisitions and building projects, and I'm excited to work with you." Starting your first building project in your mid-20s, Mr. Campbell clucked his tongue, smiling still. The apple doesn't fall far, as they say. Beaming, Lawrence stepped out of the older man's office. Thank you for your time. I will hear from you later in the week. I'll give you a call in a few days with updates. Mr. Campbell walked Lawrence back through the hallway and into the lobby, opening the front door for him. Take care and be safe. Thank you. You too. Lawrence waved. Chapter 2. Whoa, Elijah Coleman rumbled, and his stocky gelding slowed to a stop beside a simple, open shed. The cowboy jumped off the horse and adjusted his hat, touching the brim as he looped the horse's reins around a wooden post, splitting the shelter into two halves. He checked the structure and rustled the matted straw bedding. He laid a little more straw before wiping sweat from his forehead and mounting his horse again, clucking his tongue. The horse moved forward, walking in a casual gait towards the next structure. 3 mares congregated around the second structure. One laid inside on the straw, while the other 2 lingered right outside of the shade with their heads held low. When Elijah approached, the standing females perked up, ears swiveling towards the noise. They studied the cowboy and his gelding before trotting away from him. The reclining mare eased herself onto her long legs, but continued occupying the shelter until Elijah reached it. His gelding pulled one ear forward and lifted his head. The male hopped forward, containing his excitement as he approached the mare. Elijah chuckled. Hang on. He dismounted his horse and the mare approached. The gelding snorted. The mare squealed and kicked her front leg up. The pair paused again, and after a few seconds the mare lashed out a second time. She tossed her mane and the gelding lifted his head. Elijah shook his head. Clowns, he muttered as he surveyed the second structure. He slipped the mare a small cube of hay. Her whiskers tickled his palm and she petitioned for another treat, but Elijah shook his head. The gelding locked his legs and lowered his head after he greeted the mare, but the mare followed Elijah around the structure and inside of it. I'm done giving you treats, ma'am. The mare nickered. Yeah? Tell me about it. She nickered a second time, glancing behind her before returning her gaze to Elijah. He stroked her neck. I promise I'm not going to fill you with treats. You'll get more tomorrow. With that, Elijah mounted his gelding again and continued about his day. He rode the perimeter of the fence, pausing and observing the horses as the day progressed. By the time he returned to his log cabin, dusk settled around him. He hopped off his horse and undressed him, removing his saddle and bridle. He groomed the horse's neck and offered the lazy gelding 2 treats. Good work today. The gelding nickered. Yeah. Tomorrow, same place, same time. The cowboy hooked an arm around the gelding's neck, touching his lips to the animal's skin before patting his torso. After the affection, the gelding trotted off, and Elijah collected his items as a car rolled up a makeshift driveway. He lifted his head and paused, fixing his eyes towards the vehicle. He froze in place, rocking his weight in his boots. The vehicle rolled to a stop beside his faded truck, and he tucked his saddle under his arm, jamming his hands in his pockets. His eyes squinted. The vehicle's door opened, and ringed fingers gripped the top of the door as a slender, well-dressed creature emerged from inside. Brown curls framed a square face, and green eyes glowed against the burnt-orange sky. Who are you? The stranger spat. His eyebrows scrunched together on a smooth forehead, and he swung the door to his luxury vehicle closed. This is private property, and you shouldn't be on it. Whose? Elijah raised one eyebrow, lifting his chin as the other man stormed up to him. It's mine. I bought it at an auction. The cowboy laughed. You're on the wrong property then. This land belongs to the Thomas family, and my family's been working it for 30 years. No, the suited man drawled, adjusting his tie around his neck. I purchased it at an auction. I paid the back taxes on it, and it's mine. The Thomas family was the previous owner, but it seems as if they weren't too interested in maintaining it. The stranger's green eyes darted around the area before landing on the cowboy again. He sucked in his breath, puffing out his chest and lifting his head a little higher. His total height barely reached the cowboy's broad shoulders, but his sweet bergamot and pine cologne reached the cowboy's nose. It smelled like money and privilege. All right. The cowboy set his jaw. Well, you have to vacate this place within the next 30 days. Excuse me? Elijah's eyes flew open and he scoffed. Well, that ain't gonna happen. I got 10 horses living on this land. He pointed to the pasture. Well, you and your 10 horses are going to have to find a new place to live in 30 days. Might I suggest an apartment complex? Elijah shuddered, sucking his teeth. I need more than 30 days. They're wild mustangs, and I'm working on getting them trained and rehomed. He schooled his voice, leashing his simmering anger. Well, considering you aren't even supposed to be here, I don't have to give you anything more than 30 days. And I'm not. Your little horse project will just have to find another place to operate. He shrugged. Don't make me get my lawyer involved with this. We talkin' lawyers now, the cowboy muttered. Yes, we're talking lawyers. Technically, you're squatting, and squatting is illegal. He pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. I am so glad I came to check the land. This is going to throw my plans completely off schedule. Plans? The stranger cradled the cell phone in both of his hands, cocking his hip out to the side as his thumbs tapped against the screen. Elijah drank in his form. Save for the sour expression on his face, the other man was a vision. He was the most beautiful thing Elijah had seen in a while, bold and smart like the horses he rehabilitated. The wind tousled his mane of thick brown locks. When the stranger flicked his green eyes up again, a shiver trickled down Elijah's spine. His eyes were wild. Yes. I'm going to turn this place into a vacation resort. There are 2 natural springs on this land, and I've heard this place has a lovely view. Elijah snorted. Okay. He turned his head away from the other man, looking around the area and grinding his teeth together. Figures. Rich people can't leave a damn thing the way it's supposed to be. Gotta turn everything into some damn money-making scheme. What? Why hurt me? You ain't got enough money already? You really gotta turn some beautiful land into vacation homes for your rich friends? Vacation homes, Elijah scoffed, what the world really needs. I'm sorry, the stranger jerked his neck back, recoiling from Elijah's sharp words. What did you say? I said, Elijah took a step closer to the stranger, standing right in front of him, breast to breast, the world doesn't need more places for you and your rich friends to vacation. He narrowed his eyes to venomous slits, unflinching with Elijah in front of him. The man's full lips twitched. He licked them as a little color bloomed on his cheeks. And the world needs more places to keep overbred animals instead. I'm sure what the world definitely needs is more horses. Elijah snarled. Shocked you don't own a few. No gypsy van or someone else taking care of. And illusion. You didn't grow up riding. No, the stranger hissed. You know what? I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. This is my land. I own it. So, I want you to vacate it in 30 days. You and your horses have to be gone. I need more in 30 days. I already said that. 29. The stranger stared at him, lips tight and eyes blazing. Elijah clamped his mouth shut, rolling his shoulders. He met the stranger's gaze with a hard one of his own. 28. Fine, he snapped. 30 days and I'll be gone. 28 days, you mean? The cowboy shivered. His blood boiled in his veins, and adrenaline coursed through him, accelerating his heart and pumping blood to his exhausted muscles. They flexed. He balled his hands into fists. 28, he snarled. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. The young stranger turned away from Elijah, slapping him in the face with his sweet cologne. He put his cell phone to his ear as he strode back to his vehicle. The body of his suit hugged his slight curves, narrowing at his waist and stopping mid-crotch, showing a peak of his tight ass filling the seat of his straight-cut slacks. Elijah's nostrils flared as he watched the rich boy retreat. Arousal came at the heels of the adrenaline, and he cursed himself for it. This spoiled, rich stranger infuriated him and excited him at the same time. Sure, he whispered. The stranger offered Elijah one last look before he dipped back into his vehicle. Chapter 3. Lawrence watched the cowboy from his tinted windows, wetting his lips as his cell phone rang in his ear. The man's mahogany skin glistened in the setting sunlight, and his fitted jeans framed his toned ass and legs, traveling all the way down to his booted feet. As the air cooled around them and the sun left the sky, the cowboy shrugged off his plaid work shirt and tied it around his waist, performing his last chores with his bare back exposed to the air. "Hello?" Mr. Campbell's voice came through the cell phone. Lawrence cleared his throat. "Hi. We have a problem." "What is it?" "There's someone living on the land. And this is why I told you to check it." "Squatting, I assume?" "He says he's been here for 30 years, Lawrence whispered. "Sorry, his family. His family has been here for 30 years doing something with horses. Mustangs, I think he said." "Mustangs," Mr. Campbell mused. "I told him he had to be out in 30 days. Will it delay our progress?" "Shouldn't, as long as he's gone in 30 days. If he's not, then you will have to take legal action." "Exciting." Lawrence worked his jaws. "I have to go. I will call you back later." He ended the call and fit his key into the ignition of his vehicle. He turned it and his car sputtered awake. He wrinkled his forehead. "Okay." He frowned. The vehicle enveloped him in a cloud of smoke, and his eyes went wide. Shaking fingers turned the car off, and he jumped out of it. Lawrence looked at the old beat-up truck next to his car, and then down the dirt path before scowling. He scanned the area for the cowboy. When he didn't find him, his scowl deepened, and he stomped up the stairs to the man's house. No doorbell. Figures. His shoulders sagged with resignation, and he knocked on the door before taking a step backwards. There was no answer, so he stepped forward again. As he lifted his hand, the door flew open. The cowboy occupied the doorframe, shirtless with damp, swarthy skin. Lawrence's heart jumped into his throat. "What?" the man drawled, rubbing the crease left on his forehead from his hat. "I need you to look at my car." The cowboy peered out of his house, looking into the driveway before turning back to Lawrence. I looked at it. Thought you were leaving." "I mean really look at it. I am trying to leave, but it's smoking." "Yeah," the cowboy agreed, bobbing his head. "Yes. Can you do something about it? Do I look like a mechanic to you?" Lawrence squeezed his hands into fists as the cowboy's warm brown eyes landed on him, amused and smiling at Lawrence's situation. "I don't know how mechanics look. Your vehicle is old. Who fixes it?" "I do." "Ugh. So you are a mechanic then?" Lawrence folded his arms across his chest. His heart thudded against his ribcage. His blood rushed around his body. The cowboy offered a lopsided grin down at him. Lawrence's cheeks flamed. His whole face warmed. "Guess I am." The cowboy straightened up, corded muscles stretching across his chest. "But I have things to do since I have to get out of here in 27 days and 23 hours. I'm very busy, sir." "Don't call me sir," Lawrence muttered. "Aha." The cowboy stepped past Lawrence, descending his porch steps and approaching the luxury sedan. Lawrence turned around, watching the man's tight ass move in his jeans. They were an unwelcome distraction. Lawrence bit his bottom lip as the cowboy lifted the hood of the vehicle and bent over it. His jeans stretched over his ass, outlining twin globes and creasing in the middle. The thick seam of Elijah's jeans disappeared in his firm ass. Lawrence followed him, warily approaching his side and peering under the hood of the vehicle too. The winding belts and chunky metal devices meant nothing to the rich man. "What's wrong with it?" he asked, turning soft eyes up to the cowboy. The other man grunted. "Looks like your engine's about shot. How old is this thing?" "It's not even 3 years old. I wouldn't be caught dead driving a vehicle any older." The cowboy rolled his eyes and chuckled. "Well, you got a shitty motor then." He drew out a stick and removed a cap, dipping the slender stick into the opening and pulling it out again. "Your oil's low." He closed the cap, moving on and checking another. "Your transmission fluid's low too, but really your motor's the problem. The smoke was from your motor." Okay. Lawrence wrung his fingers. What now? You need to take it to a shop and do something about the motor. But I can't drive it. The cowboy chuckled. Nah, I probably wouldn't drive it. So, I should tow it to a mechanic's shop? Yeah, probably. Today. Lawrence lifted his eyebrows. Tonight? Well, nah, probably not tonight. Everywhere's closed. Tomorrow's Sunday. You ought to wait until Monday. The cowboy slammed the hood down. Okay, so what do I do then? Take it to a shop on Monday. Until then, I don't know, steal some bread from poor people. That's a good Sunday to you, ain't it? Lawrence blinked. His comment stung, and Lawrence's throat constricted as frustrated tears wet the corners of his eyes. His jaw ticked, and he brushed dried mud off the side of his vehicle. Look. You got a place to stay. Just go there. In what vehicle? Call a rental. We are hours from civilization. A rental isn't going to deliver me a vehicle all the way out here. I want you to take me to my hotel. More laughter. You're cute. I ain't taking your sorry ass anywhere. I got a tent if you want to camp out here until Monday. Otherwise, I hope your back seat's comfortable. I can't sleep in my car, Lawrence protested. Why can't you? We've all done it. I just can't. Where will I use the bathroom? I suggest somewhere kinda away from your vehicle. You know, because smells carry, and there's no way to stop shit from stinking. You. The cowboy eyed Lawrence for a moment, dimples piercing his cheeks as one corner of his lips tugged into a lazy smirk. You'll be all right. I guess. Lawrence's face fell as he looked at his car, petting the sparkling exterior. He had gotten his vehicle tuned up before the trip, or at least he thought he had. Now he wasn't sure. He knew he asked for an oil change. His check engine light hadn't even come on until smoke had surrounded the vehicle. He wet his lips inside, shoulders sagging. He thumped his forehead against the car, closing his eyes. The cowboy shuffled around, shifting his weight from one leg to the other, and hooking his thumbs in his belt loops. All right. Look. I can fix the motor for you if you want, and give the whole thing a tune-up. It looks like your mechanic screwed you over. I'd probably fire him. Lawrence rolled his eyes. Obviously. Just saying. How much are you going to charge me? The cowboy wet his lips, glancing towards the pasture and the horses grazing inside. Nothing. But it's going to take a couple days. Gotta get the parts in and then gotta get to work, and I still have to care for the horses every day too. Lawrence nodded, exhaling a deep breath. Okay, he paused. Do I still have to sleep in my car? I told you I'd give you a tent. Lawrence pursed his lips. Aight. The cowboy tipped his head to the cabin. Come on. The man patted the hood of the vehicle and turned away, jogging back to his house. Lawrence moved after him, shrugging as he entered the cowboy's home, eyes roving over the rustic interior. The walls were warm, as was the rich red rug spread across the ground and the plush couch resting on the corner of it. A crochet blanket rested on the back of the couch with a book and a remote on top of it. The cowboy disappeared into the kitchen, clanking pots and silverware together before poking his head back into the living room. Lawrence hadn't moved. There's no butler coming out to walk for you, so make yourself comfortable. If you want to change out of the monkey suit, go down the hall to the last door on your left and dig around in my closet. You'll find something. Oh, Lawrence sighed, cool breath chilling wet lips. What now? I can borrow your clothes? You got some in your car? He shook his head. No, I left my suitcase at my hotel. Then unless you're sleeping in a suit all night, I guess you have to wear something of mine. Or I guess you could hang around in your drawers. Drawers? What? Your underwear. The cowboy waved a wooden spoon at him. Whatever you got under there. Oh. The tips of his ears burned, and the back of his neck tingled. Lawrence scratched the back of his head. I'll go look for something in your room. Yep. Then come on out and eat. You're cooking? Do you see a private chef around here? No. The dark-skinned man winked. The rich boy is catching on. Go on and get changed and then come out here. My mama taught me better than to let someone starve. Your mother taught you to cook. Yup, the cowboy drawled. Guess you're just going to hang out in here and talk me to death. I know. Lawrence scowled. What's your name? He's going to question me to death, the cowboy chuckled. Elijah Coleman. Most people call me Eli. Eli. Elijah's an old name. Yeah. Biblical. If we're talking, come on in here. Elijah ducked back into the kitchen after beckoning Lawrence forward. Lord. You act like you have never been in a house before. Lawrence scratched the back of his head again and stepped into the kitchen, leaning against the wall right next to the entrance. The cowboy resumed cooking. He browned meat on the stove as he opened a can of beans and a can of tomatoes. What are you making? Chili. Something to warm your bones. It'll get cold tonight. Elijah shrugged. I think it's the altitude. Oh? I can help? Are you asking me or telling me? I'm asking. Oh, okay. Well, nah. I got everything just about handled. Lawrence nodded. Are you going to ask me what my name is? I thought your name was Richie. No, he grumbled. My name is Lawrence. Lawrence Van Rensselaer. Well, that's a name. I bet you had a time in elementary school trying to write it out. It wasn't easy, no. Biting his bottom lip, Lawrence pushed himself off the wall and moved over to the counter, placing his palms flat on it and looking at the cowboy. Stir the beans and tomatoes, and he handed Lawrence a seasoning packet, rushing his knuckles along the back of Lawrence's as he did. Pour this in. Lawrence gasped and jerked his hand away. He tipped his head down, closing his eyes as fire kindled on his face, burning his cheeks and forehead. The packet fell on the counter. Lawrence balled his hand into a fist, and his cheeks flamed even more. Sorry. No need to apologize. You got it, or you want me to do it? I'll do it. He snatched the packet of seasoning off the counter and tore it open. Don't break a nail or anything. I know you're not used to all this heavy lifting. The cowboy leaned against the counter, folding his arms across his broad chest. Be quiet. All right, Larry. I'll let you concentrate then. Lawrence dumped the season packet into the tomatoes and beans, mixing it with a wooden spoon lying on the stove surface. Can I taste it? If you wanna, but you just put the seasoning in there, so it probably doesn't taste like anything. How long have you lived up here? I already told you how long I lived here, but you were too busy being a little jackass. You said your family had been here 30 years, not how long you had been here. I mean, I figured it was obvious. I've been here close to 30 years. My dad lived up here working on his own first, then my mom and I joined him a few years after I was born. She didn't want to live out in the country with a tiny baby. Oh, okay. Lawrence picked some of the browning meat out of the skillet and ate it. Grease stained his fingers. Yeah. May I ask where your parents are now? My dad died when I was a teenager from an accident. My mom passed away a few years ago. Are you an only child? Yeah. She lived with me up until the last year of her death. She had so many doctor's appointments that it made no sense for her to keep living here. We got her a place in the city and a caregiver, and I visited as much as I can. Oh. I'm sorry for your losses. It's all right. The meat looks about done. Lawrence yanked his hands away, clasping them behind his back. Ah. Okay. Now what? You do it. Elijah laughed. You can do it. It's easy. He placed a strainer in the sink, and then moved behind Lawrence, pressing his chest into Lawrence's back and grabbing a thick fabric square with burn marks on the corners. You're going to pick up the skillet with this, carry it to the sink, and dump it in the strainer. This gets the grease off of it, before we put it in with the beans and tomatoes." Lawrence's eyelids fluttered, and the cowboy's warm voice next to his ears glued his feet to the floor. "Aye, what? You can do it. You can finish up this meal without my help." Chapter 4. Lawrence closed his eyes, drowning in the cowboy's honest encouragement. The cowboy didn't even know him, and yet he had already surpassed Lawrence's parents in compliments. His parents weren't bad parents. After all, he was one of 2 children, and he had entered the Millionaires Club at 5 years old. With his investment savings doubling every 7 years, his savings totaled $8 million currently. He had a couple $100,000 in his personal account, but the problem was they expected nothing from him. And because they expected nothing from him, they never encouraged him or praised him. Lawrence had grown up with a private chef, a nanny, and a driver, but he hadn't grown up with expectations. To his father, it didn't matter if he could turn 100 acres of land into a successful vacation spot. His mother wanted him to be happy, and expressed it in her quiet way, but she didn't understand his drive or his need for creation. "Wrap the fabric around the handle because it's hot and carry it over," the cowboy explained, taking Lawrence's hand. His rough fingers traced the length of Lawrence's fingers, sliding between them before he retreated. His skin tingled after the cowboy's hand moved away. "Why, yes." He squinted, wrapping the pad around the handle and lifting it off the stove. "It's heavy." "Yeah. It's cast iron. These are the best pans you can buy. They hold flavor once they're seasoned, and they last forever." Elijah stepped backwards, hooking his thumbs under the band of his jeans. Lawrence held the handle with both of his hands as he shuffled over to the sink. He tipped the skillet forward with his whole body. The meat slid into the strainer. Lawrence took a break when half of the meat had fallen, and he grabbed the wooden spoon, scraping the rest into the plastic container and returning the skillet to the stove. "Now what?" "I like to rinse the meat and toss it a bit. This is another reason why I don't add the seasoning to the meat. You'll just wash it all off." Lawrence nodded. "I see." He rinsed the meat and dumped it into the high-sided pot already containing beans and tomatoes. The spicy fragrance filled his nose and his stomach rumbled. "It's smelling good." The cowboy grabbed a box of saltine crackers from the cabinet. "Let it fester a bit, and then it'll be ready to eat." "Okay." Lawrence nodded. "Thank you." "For helping me." "Yeah, you're welcome. You don't make it a picnic. I promise you that." Lawrence placed the top on the chili and stepped away from it. "I guess we have a few minutes. I should change." "Yup," Elijah drawled, "go on down the hall. I'll watch the food." "Yes. Right." Latticing his fingers, Lawrence moved down the hall. He turned the corner into the cowboy's bedroom, spying a collection of well-cared-for hats on one side of the room. Elijah's wide-open closet revealed numerous plaid shirts, and his hanging-open drawers exploded with white shirts and multicolored briefs. Lawrence's features soured before his eyes widened. Realization dawned on him: Elijah didn't have a cleaning service. Elijah had to clean on his own. "Wow," Lawrence murmured, chewing his bottom lip. He picked through Elijah's clothes, trading his 3-piece suit for a shirt hanging on his body and a pair of shorts. The ensemble shaved 5 years off his age, and Lawrence didn't know how he felt about it. He hung his suit on the closet's door handle and placed his hands on his hips, surveying the man's disorganized dresser. After carrying all the underclothes to Elijah's bed, he separated them by color and type, rolling all the shirts and stacking the briefs. Elijah knocked on the bedroom door. "Hey. You all right in there? You best not be bustin' a nut in my bed." "Oh my goodness." Lawrence rolled his eyes. "I'm not in your bed. You can come in. I'm organizing your drawers. It's a mess in here." The cowboy pushed the door open and lifted both of his eyebrows as Lawrence tucked away his shirts and briefs, closing all of the drawers afterwards. "Ah. Didn't know you could fold clothes. Thought you had a nanny for it." "I watched. I couldn't handle the mess, so Yeah. You touched all over my drawers. Lawrence rubbed his hands together. Exactly. I touched all over them. See, can we eat now? It's been a long day, and I would like to eat so I can start my evening routine. All right, Prince. I'll fix your plate. Thank you. The cowboy nodded, scanning his eyes over the other man. His nostrils flared, and his thick lips parted over a little sigh. Dilated pupils fixed on Lawrence. Yeah, he grunted, bowing out of the room. Lawrence bit his bottom lip over a little smile, joining the cowboy in the kitchen after washing his face and hands in the hallway bathroom. You want to sit at the table, or in the living room? The cowboy glanced up. The table, please. Elijah placed two mismatched bowls on the counter with the box of saltine crackers between them. This one's yours. He pointed to a floral print bowl. Why? Because mine is chipped, and I wouldn't give a guest a broken bowl. Lawrence's lips tugged into another little smile. Okay. With his back straight, he scooted the chair up until he could reach his food, stirring the chili with a spoon before tasting it. He tipped his head and brought the spoon up to his lips. The cowboy rested his elbows on the table and dug into his food, scooping the chili onto the crackers and eating both at the same time. We'll be here all night if you're going to eat all prim and proper. I don't know any other way to eat. Lawrence frowned. Relax. You look like you've got a stick buried up your ass. Lawrence's features soured and he put his spoon down, placing his hands in his lap. Today has been a lot. Can you please stop right now? I was teasing. I know, but I can't anymore. All your jokes aren't funny. Some of them are mean. All right. Thank you. He tapped his spoon on the side of the bowl. So, what do you do here exactly? I told you this already, but I'll say it again. I rescue and train wild mustangs. The cowboy's body went rigid. And I will ignore your statement in favor of pleasant conversation, Lawrence quipped back. Where do you get them from? Actually, the government catches them. They're not native to America, but the Bureau of Land Management will round up the excess animals and try to find homes for them. They pay you $1,000 to take one because they're just wild animals. Sometimes you can get them to calm enough and get some training in them, but sometimes they stay wild. You train wild animals? Wild horses. What's the difference? Horses are domesticated already. Mustangs are feral, not undomesticated. You can't make an undomesticated animal domesticated. I couldn't up and get a tiger and turn it into a perfect house cat. I mean, in about 6 generations I'm guessing I could, but not right off the bat. There's no such thing as undomesticated horses. Zebras. Oh. They're horses. I mean, they're in the same family or whatever. They're not exactly horses though. You could breed them together. I've heard of people doing it, but the offspring are most likely sterile, like when you breed a donkey and a horse. Why is that? Lord, I don't know. Do I look like a scientist to you? All I'm saying is horses are funny things, but they're not wild animals. They're domesticated, is all. What's their wild ancestor? I don't know that either. Oh? Is it something like wolves and dogs? I mean, I guess, but I don't know. I really hadn't given it much thought. There's nothing you can breed a horse with that'll make sterile offspring. Otherwise we'd have lots of mules running around. What do mules look like? Horses mostly. Slightly funny looking. I mean, I'd go through it, but it's not important. I don't have any mules because I'm not doing any real farm work. Oh, okay. Lawrence chewed his bottom lip, finally going back to his food. He grabbed a cracker and copied Elijah, piling it high with chili and biting into it. He groaned at the taste. The salt from the crackers brought out the spices in the chili. And the roundness of the meal settled easily in his belly. Oh wow. This is good. You're a good cook. It was a spice packet, but I can make my own spice mixes if I have to. Usually I don't see a reason to, though. Don't fix what's not broken. I like this spice packet. Can we have this tomorrow, too? Elijah smiled and laughed. Oh, sweetheart, we're having it for the next 4 days. We call them leftovers. 4 days? Food stays good for 4 days. Yeah. It's better on the second day. So, what do you get up to? What do you mean? Lawrence ate another cracker piled high with chili. I mean, what's your job? Oh. It's complicated. Is it? The cowboy arched an eyebrow. Yes, because I'm a millionaire. I don't have to work, but I do enjoy working all the same. I used to be an events organizer. Some people want to throw parties but just have absolutely no taste. That's where I came in. I have taste, and I was willing to sell my taste for $100 an hour. The cowboy looked up. What? $100 an hour? Yes? Lawrence finished his food and pushed his bowl away. Elijah cleared his throat. Let me get this straight. You were selling people nothing to the tune of $1 an hour. Yes? He wrinkled his forehead. I was selling quality and expertise. I also did some home interior design projects. I can't believe what some people will pay for. The cowboy's face distorted, and he finished up his food, snagging both of their plates and taking them to the sink. My job bothers you? Yeah. You know what? Yeah, it kind of does. It's just, he grit his teeth, so damn trivial. So what, you spent hours in the cool air conditioning, fighting over if your client should buy striped or polka-dotted pillows. You're getting mad about what I picked as my profession? Yeah, I'm getting mad about it. You're a millionaire already, and you chose to take more money rather than help the planet? Have you ever done anything not for yourself? I worked. Working for clients isn't for myself. At $100 an hour it is. Elijah dumped the bowls in the sink and ran the water, rinsing them with his hands and a little liquid detergent. I bet your bowls are chipped because you slammed them down. The cowboy seethed and Lawrence smiled, pleased by it. It was a sick game, but he reveled in inspiring this stranger to anger. Have you given anything? Given like how? I make a yearly donation to that one breast cancer foundation. You don't even know the name of it. Sharon B. Connor? No. Okay then, no, I don't know the name of it. Do I have to know the name of it for my money to be accepted? Lawrence picked at his nail beds, now propping his elbows on the table and stretching his back. No, you don't. Money's always green. The cowboy put the clean dishes away and walked out of the kitchen. Where are you going? For a walk. The front door opened and closed, and Lawrence sank back in his seat. The eerie silence of the log cabin sent shivers down his spine, but he wasn't going after Elijah either. Chapter 5. Damn. Elijah didn't know it was possible to hate and love someone at the same time. Love. The thought rolled around his brain. He wasn't sure about the love part, but he knew already that he appreciated Lawrence's obnoxious presence. He was fresh, intelligent, and a spitfire. He bucked and kicked with his words, and Elijah appreciated it. It kept him on his toes. After a long walk, Elijah returned to his log cabin, grabbing a stack of blankets from the spare bedroom. He stashed the leftovers away in the refrigerator and stretched out on the couch, falling asleep as soon as his head hit the cushions. The cowboy slept hard until the next morning and woke up before dawn. His internal clock jolted him away, even though he had gone to bed late the night before. He tiptoed through his bedroom, grabbing a clean shirt and a clean pair of jeans before tiptoeing back out. He spent the morning checking the horse sheds, cleaning the pasture, and laying new straw on the covered ground inside the shelters. The day temperatures climbed. By midday, his skin had tanned a shade darker, and he had worked up a sweat. He rode his gelding to the edge of the pasture at noon, undressing him and giving him a break as he stalked up to his cabin. He moved inside, removing his hat and peeling his soaked shirt off his body. The rich boy was nowhere to be found. Elijah grumbled, draping his shirt over the back of a chair and shuffling around the kitchen. He made himself a lunch, banging pots and pans together until the door to his bedroom opened. The floor creaked under Lawrence's weight. The cowboy turned to him as he entered the kitchen. Lawrence knuckled his eyes. What time is it?" "Past noon," Elijah snapped. "Okay, someone's still in a bad mood, I see. You been asleep all morning?" "I don't have to answer your question, but yes, I have. I just woke up because you were making a bunch of noise." "Huh. I wonder what it's like not having to work. You just wake up and what, money appears in your bank?" "No, money doesn't appear in my bank. I live on 1% of my savings a year if I don't work at all. If I work, I'll live on both and put my excess money into savings every month if I don't spend it all." "Okay, so how much do you live off a year?" Lawrence wet his lips. Say it. I already know you're a spoiled rich brat. You don't have anything to hide." $100,000 right now." $100,000, Elijah rumbled under his breath. "You got house notes or anything?" "No, I paid for a house years ago when I was actively working. I worked really hard for a year and I bought a place, but I travel a lot, so most often I rent the place out." Elijah shook his head. "Okay, if you're going to get mad about how much I make, you shouldn't ask me about it." "Clearly. Besides, right now you're literally looking for reasons to be angry at me. I didn't personally demand you come here and work with horses." "Oh, okay. You forgot yesterday, since it's no big deal to you, I see." "What?" "Forget it. There's lunch if you're hungry." Elijah's hunger had evaporated as his anger boiled inside him. He grabbed his shirt and hat, storming out of the kitchen. He bumped shoulders with Lawrence on the way out. He stomped back to the pasture and hopped the fence, walking until his legs were spent and his anger dissipated. The cowboy slowed his pace and walked further. He pulled his hat off his head and combed his fingers through his tight curls, squinting back towards log cabin, towards Lawrence's luxury vehicle parked next to his faded truck. He hated how quickly Lawrence angered him. They couldn't make it through a single conversation without one of them being put out by the other. They were too different. They came from different worlds. Lawrence had a lavish lifestyle, and even if he wanted a regular old cowboy, he would never be satisfied with the simple life. He wasn't going to fix fences and break in horses. The cowboy walked along the pasture for a few more hours before he returned to the log cabin, sweatier than before but less angry. He shrugged out of his shirt and wiped his face, hanging his hat on a rack by the door. The smell of scorched food touched his nose as he kicked off his boots, and he groaned. "You all right?" he called through the house, closing one eye. "Yes?" Lawrence replied, tone high-pitched and stressed. I'm fine, really." "Smells like you were trying to cook something." No. "Well, yes. I tried to warm the chili for you." "Ah? All of it?" "No, not all of it." "Did you take it out of the burnt pot?" "How did you know it was burned?" Lawrence's tone wilted. "Lucky guess," Elijah grunted, moving into the kitchen. "Did you take it out of the burnt pot?" "No. I stirred it." Lawrence winced and arched his eyebrows. "Is it ruined?" The cowboy grabbed the wooden spoon and tasted the chili. He rolled the beans and meat around on his tongue before wrinkling his nose. "Well? It's ruined, isn't it? You know, it's good you tried to heat it up for me." "It's ruined." "Yeah." Elijah shrugged, cupping Lawrence's long face in his hand. He touched his clefted chin and stroked his cheek with his thumb. "Thanks for trying, though." Lawrence turned his head to Elijah's hand, lips brushing across his palm. His eyelashes touched his cheeks as he closed his eyes. "What are we going to have for dinner?" "I'll whip something up for you. Take a sit down at the table." "Okay." Lawrence reluctantly vacated the counter, dropping into a wooden chair and crossing his legs. He tucked the long tails of Elijah's shirt between his exposed thighs and wrapped his arms around the back of the chair. "What did you do all day?" The cowboy opened the refrigerator and stared at the contents. "If I tell you, are you going to get upset if it's not what you want to hear?" Elijah snorted. No, I won't get mad. Are you sure you won't get mad? I'm sure. Okay. Lawrence sucked in a breath. An old client of mine called with an emergency, and I spent the day counseling her through planning her child's 3rd birthday party. How much did she pay you? I'm not telling you. Huh. Round about $1,000 an hour then. Not quite so much, but I definitely should start charging that much. Elijah stifled a chuckle, hard features softening as Lawrence teased. It was better than fighting, after all. He turned a collection of raw ingredients into cheese enchiladas, and they ate in silence, stealing glances at one another. They were both uninterested in breaking their brief truce. Elijah swirled dark red sauce around his clean plate as Lawrence finished his last few bites of his meal. These were good too. You're a very good cook. It's nothing. Tomorrow's Monday. Yes? I can order your car parts tomorrow, and I guess if you want to go back to your hotel, I can drop you off there after I get my morning chores done. Lawrence bit his lip. Right. I should probably go to my hotel. All of my clothes are there. Yeah. So it's settled then. Tomorrow around noon, we'll order the parts and I'll drive you to your hotel. Okay. Well. Lawrence shrugged his shoulders up to his ears, and he turned his bright eyes to Elijah, meeting his gaze before looking away again. The cowboy's heart fluttered, and he smiled at Lawrence's peaks of shyness. The millionaire was shy. It made him human, and Elijah loved it. You should probably get some rest or something. Actually, I was going to clean the kitchen. My client said I should do the dishes if someone else cooks for me. It's polite. You asked her if you should do the dishes. No. Okay. Tell me what you asked her. No, Lawrence snapped. If you stay in here, I will start my nightly routine and leave you to clean up. Elijah's eyebrows lifted. Well, all right then. He waved and moved down the hall, disappearing into the bathroom for a shower. By the time he exited the bathroom, Lawrence had finished the dishes and retreated to the bedroom, so the kitchen and living room were clear. Chapter 6. The next day, Lawrence stared at the ceiling as he listened to the cowboy shuffle around the house. He closed his eyes when Elijah entered the bedroom and opened them again when he left. He climbed out of bed after he heard the front door open and close, showering and tugging on more of Elijah's oversized clothes. Since it was Monday, he grabbed his laptop out of the trunk of his car and entered the kitchen. A plate of eggs, grits, and sausage sat on the table covered with plastic wrap and on top of a scrawled note. Lawrence picked up the note. Thanks for cleaning up last night. Let me get my morning chores done. We'll go to town this afternoon. Eli. P.S. I made breakfast for you. It's probably not fit for a prince, but I tried. Lawrence rolled his eyes, folding the note and tucking it into his pocket before he uncovered the plate of food. As he turned on his laptop, he nibbled the cold eggs and mashed his fork against the hardened grits. Nimble fingers alternated between pecking on his keyboard and popping small bits of food into his mouth until his plate was clean and his email inbox was empty. Then he settled into a series of calls. He called his contractor, his accountant, and his best friend. He spoke business with his contractor, getting updates on the zoning laws and custom blueprint process, but his heart wasn't in the build anymore. Being with the cowboy and seeing the unashamed passion in his eyes for the land changed Lawrence. He needed more time before making a final decision. His contractor's excitement passed him by, and at the end of the conversation, Lawrence was more troubled and confused than when he started it. He called his accountant next, touching bases with the man on his current investments and market trends. The conversation with his accountant lasted most of the morning, and he ended the call as his cell phone chimed with a message. His best friend was in crisis. Lawrence called him last and coached him through the loss of his newest business venture. The cowboy entered the house as Lawrence weaseled his way out of another winding conversation about capitalism and the myth of the American dream. He ended the call and looked at the burly man. Hi. The cowboy lifted his hat off his head, setting it down. Yeah. You about ready to go to town? No, actually, I need to get dressed. You're sweaty. Yeah. It's what happens when you spend all morning doing hard work. I mean, are you going to change? The cowboy shrugged. Probably my shirt, yeah. How was breakfast? Oh, Lawrence glanced back at his empty plate. It was good. Thank you. Elijah nodded. Good. Lawrence touched the back of his cell phone to his lips as he watched Elijah. The cowboy strolled around the living room, unbuttoning his shirt and shrugging it off his broad shoulders. When he caught Lawrence's gaze, he grinned. Lawrence's face burned, and he cleared his throat. Thought you were getting dressed, the cowboy prompted. I am. Lawrence closed his laptop and dashed down the hall. He dressed in his three-piece suit, tying his necktie and lacing his box-toed loafers on his feet. After 2 days of being in the cowboy's sun-bleached shirts, his suit was constricting and stiff. He buttoned the sleeves and surveyed himself in the mirror before joining the cowboy in the front room again. I'm ready. Elijah nodded, raking his dark eyes over Lawrence's body. Looking good. His eyes lingered at the flat front of Lawrence's slacks, and his lips curved downward. What? Nothing, Elijah rumbled. You're just looking good. He cleared his throat and filed past Lawrence, ducking into the bedroom. Elijah returned wearing a different plaid shirt with a new hat on his head. I'm ready too. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, filling Lawrence's nose with his natural scent as he passed. Lawrence followed him. You change hats? Yeah. This is my going out hat. The other one is my working hat. Oh? What does it mean when you're wearing your going out hat? It doesn't mean anything. The cowboy unlocked the doors to his truck and climbed into the driver's side. Get in. Ah. Lawrence took the passenger seat, buckling himself in and resting his hands in his lap. I was thinking we could order the parts first, then get something to eat, then I can drop you off back at your hotel room. I want to stop by my hotel room first so I can change out of this. I don't want to wear a suit all day. All right. We'll stop at your hotel room first. Thank you. Yep. The cowboy gripped the gear shift as he reversed out of the parking lot and onto the main road, leaving Lawrence's vehicle alone in the driveway. So, what did you get up to all morning? Lawrence eyed the cowboy. What? Every time you ask me what I did, you get angry about it. Are you going to get angry? I'm working on it. The rich man wet his lips, running his tongue over them before clenching his jaws. Okay. Well, I worked through all of my emails, then I had business calls. Emails? For what? When you're a young millionaire, people are always asking you for things like money, investments, endorsement. Also, I get a lot of invitations to social events. Why? Because they want me there, obviously. It's like high school. If the popular kids are going, then everyone's going, except when you get into the real world, the popular kids are usually the ones with wealth or status. And you're the wealth one? I have status too. Status like what? Elijah glanced at him, before focusing on the road again. Like people believe and trust me. My family likes throwing parties, and I've planned so many events you can't even imagine. So, you're professional at being rich. I guess sure. I don't like the word rich, but whatever. Yeah, rich people never like the word rich. It's in your rich people DNA or something. Enough, Lawrence sighed. Can we have one day where we don't fight all day? I'm tired of arguing with you about my money. Well, we wouldn't argue if you were more in touch with reality, rather than bringing up your money all the time. I didn't even bring it up. He closed his eyes. Okay, listen. I'll make a deal with you. I bet it involves money. Lawrence stared at Elijah, blinking slowly. It did, didn't it? Yeah, let's make a deal. If I go the rest of the day without a remark about your money or life or whatever, you have to help me with the horses for the rest of the week. That's 4 days you'll have to get up with your boots and cowboy hat and work with me. And if you start a fight? If I start a fight, then I'm at your service for the rest of the week. I'll cook and clean and wash like you're used to. Lawrence hummed. Okay, but with your shirt off. Elijah snorted. You want me to do everything with my shirt off? Yes, and I get to dictate your chores. Oh Lord. I don't have a pool, so you can't make me clean one. I have ideas, Lawrence smirked, for when you fail. Aha. I won't fail, sweetheart. When does the challenge start? Lawrence picked at his nail beds, cleaning dirt from his manicured nails. When we get to town, so about 2.5 hours. Perfect. I hate fighting in public. Elijah flicked his eyes at Lawrence with a scowl. Me too. It's embarrassing. My parents used to do it a lot. Really? Mine did too. I can't figure out why they stay together if all they want to do is have public fights and tabloid-covered separations. It's so annoying. I'm the socialite. I'm the one who should be getting all the attention, but no. It's my parents. Yup. Elijah chuckled. I'm not going to make this easy for you. I definitely didn't expect you to. You have to accept that my lifestyle is different from yours. I don't have to accept anything. If you want to win this, you're going to have to accept the differences. I can't be less wealthy because you don't like wealth. I don't have a problem with wealth when it goes to a good cause, or when the person is passionate about something. What are you passionate about? Buying new shoes every week. I don't buy shoes every week. No one needs 52 pairs of shoes. Lawrence rolled his eyes and looked out the window. Both of the scenarios Elijah created involved Lawrence staying at the log cabin the whole week. Would Elijah be able to cater to his every whim if they were 3 hours apart? Besides, both options put them closer together too. Either Lawrence was getting his every need catered to, or Lawrence was spending the day outside next to the cowboy. He couldn't deny his curiosity with what the cowboy did all day. He wanted to see the wild horses Elijah worked with. He wanted to see what the cowboy was so passionate about. Noted. All you really need is a good pair of boots anyway. Since you're going to be working in the field with me for 4 days, you should probably buy some boots tonight. You really think you're going to win? Yeah. I really do. Elijah offered Lawrence a boyish smile and a wink. His thick dark eyelashes brushed the tops of his cheekbones. Sure. Lawrence shook his head, returning his gaze to the street. Chapter 7. They drove the rest of the way in silence. As Lawrence saw the town up ahead, his stomach rumbled, and he pressed his fist against his torso. You all right? Elijah glanced at him. I am hungry. Could we eat something before everything else? Yeah, sure. Game's starting now too. Fine. I'm ready. Lawrence smiled. I want to sit down and eat inside somewhere. I don't like eating in vehicles. Elijah offered a tight-lipped expression back to Lawrence. Okay. What are you in the mood for? Lawrence tapped his chin. I could go for anything. I will let you decide. The cowboy nodded, scooting up in his seat as the vehicle came to a stop in front of the first of 3 traffic lights. He peeked down the cross streets before taking a left turn at the second light and pulling into a quiet diner. Here. Lawrence wrinkled his nose. Okay. It's good food. My parents and I used to come here all the time when I was a kid. Not inspiring. When was the last time you came here? A couple months ago. I promise it's still good. Elijah held the door open for Lawrence, and the suited man strolled inside. Elijah followed him, removing his hat as he stepped in the building. He held it between his fingers at the top and faced the inside to his leg. Lawrence approached the counter, and a plump hostess smiled at him. Hi. Can I see a menu? Sure. If y'all are ready to be seated, I can sit you someplace too. Lawrence gave the woman a fake smile. Thank you. The menu is fine for the moment. He accepted the menu when it was offered and opened it, scanning over the available options. What are you looking for? I wanted to know what they had available before we got to a booth. You mean a table? No, I want to sit at a booth. The cowboy smirked. Aha. You know, part of the enjoyment of going to a new restaurant is committing to eating there. What do you mean? I mean, he paused, fishing the menu out of Lawrence's fingers and leaning into him. His warm breath tickled Lawrence's jawline. I mean, take a chance. You're ruining the surprise. Lawrence's body went rigid when Elijah leaned into him. His hot breath spread goosebumps over Lawrence's pale skin. Ah. He turned his face away from Elijah and stepped away from him. Can we get a seat, please? His voice cracked and his features flooded with embarrassment. The woman looked up from the hostess counter and plastered on a retail worker smile. Of course. For two. Elijah handed her the menu. Yeah, he nodded, deep voice rumbling, for two. A booth, please. The apples of the woman's cheeks flushed when Elijah spoke. Oh, of course. Lawrence looked between them. The cowboy looked pleasant and relaxed, still clutching his hat in his hands. On the contrary, the woman fumbled until Elijah turned his attention back to Lawrence. After you, Elijah rumbled, touching the small of Lawrence's back and edging him forward. I knew you were a gentleman somewhere deep inside your cowboy heart. Lawrence moved ahead of Elijah, following the woman to a booth. He sat across from the cowboy and laced his fingers together as the host placed the menus in front of them. He thanked her, tipping his head, but she kept her eyes on Elijah. The cowboy rested his hat on the seat next to him with the brim up and the top down and rubbed his forehead. Your server will be right with you, she gushed, combing lank pixie haircut behind her disproportionately large ears. Elijah nodded, fixing his attention on the menu. Thanks. She lingered at their table, waiting for Elijah to look up, but he didn't. With a crestfallen face, she returned to her podium. He looked up when she left, focusing his attention on Lawrence. What are you getting? I haven't decided. You haven't looked at your menu, either. I remember most of it from glimpsing it earlier. Nothing stood out to me as particularly interesting to taste. Elijah whistled and laughed. How about I pick something for you? Lawrence traced his thumb along the laminated side of the menu, smoothing his tie over his button-down shirt. Okay. But I'm going to ask you a few questions first. Of course. Savory or spicy? Savory. I don't like spicy foods. The cowboy nodded. Name something spicy. Oh. Paprika peppers are a bit much for me. Elijah blinked. Okay, you really don't like spicy food. All right. Favorite protein? Turkey because it is the leanest. I will occasionally enjoy a steak. Huh. Okay. And last. Are you the kind of person who'll watch the same movie over and over again, or once you've seen something once, you don't want to watch it again? I don't know what this question has to do with food. Just answer it. Lawrence rolled his eyes. There's a comfort in watching the same movie over and over again and discovering things you missed the first time, but there's also something fun about trying new things. Which one do you like more, though? If I had to pick one, I think I would pick the first one. I would rather watch a movie I've already seen over something I haven't seen. All right. I got your order ready for you, then. Elijah took both menus, stacked them, and placed them on the corner of the wooden table. So, what do you do for fun? Lawrence lifted his chin, looking down the bridge of his nose and remembering their bet. His stomach churned. He wanted to be completely honest with this stranger, not hide parts of himself because the other man didn't like them. The cowboy was honest, despite being a little rough around the edges. The honesty and easy confidence drew Lawrence in. What do you mean, he stalled. I mean what I asked. What do you like to do for fun? He snagged the drink list and twisted it around in his fingers, chewing his bottom lip. It depends on if I'm with friends or alone. Tell me both. If I'm with friends, I like watching movies, going to concerts, or going shopping, of course. I know I host a lot of parties, but I don't like going to them. Parties are loud, and there are always sleazy guys who sneak their way in and hit on you all night. Is it a real problem for you? The cowboy's eyes sparkled. Lawrence wrinkled his nose. Yes. I don't like it. Tell them you've got a boyfriend then. And tell him he's big and bad and tames wild mustangs. So, tell them my boyfriend is you. Someone like me, sure. Them doughboys you run with can't compete with me. True, Lawrence murmured, setting the drink list back where he found it. What do you like doing when you're alone? I like drawing, actually. I used to draw a lot as a child, but I stopped as I got older. I took a few drawing classes when I was in Paris, and I fell in love with the practice again. Paris? Lawrence nodded. I love it there. If I had to live somewhere in Europe, I would pick Paris. It's romantic, and European men are different too. Different in a good way, I guess? Yes. They're more forward with their intentions. They don't do the playing the field, keeping all options open game. They call when they say they're going to call, and they're romantic. Oh yeah? They sound perfect then. Elijah's shoulders sagged even as he plastered a smirk on his face. Not completely. A lot of them are, how you say, metrosexual. What's metrosexual? The cowboy lifted an eyebrow. They're more put together than me sometimes, and they can spend a lot of time on their physical appearance. Plus, Europe doesn't encourage self-confidence as a whole, so sometimes their intentional pursuit stems from insecurities. Interesting. I want to be the one spending the most time in the bathroom, and I don't even spend a lot of time in there. Elijah nodded, pausing the conversation as a server approached the table. The cowboy ordered water and a bottle of beer, and Lawrence ordered unsweetened tea. Once the server returned with their drinks, Elijah ordered for them both, and surrendered their menus before returning his attention to Lawrence. You know not all American men are like what you say, right? I know, he sipped his tea, but I haven't dated any. Maybe you should branch out of your usual circle. Try something different. Oh yeah. Like a cowboy? Elijah didn't reply, but a boyish smile touched his face, replacing the disgruntled expression from before. Okay, Lawrence chuckled, you were fighting with me less than an hour ago. Yeah, and? Their eyes met once Lawrence had scanned up Elijah's body, once his eyes landed on the cowboy's face. Lawrence shivered. He wet his lips as his heart accelerated in his chest, and he combed his fingers through his hair. Lawrence looked away first, turning his face away and looking around the quiet establishment. They were alone in their section, but the section next to theirs hosted 3 tables full of guests. He had mixed feelings about the cowboy. Fighting with the cowboy, while infuriating, was also oddly rewarding. Especially when he grabbed the upper hand, when he knew what would set the cowboy off and what wouldn't. It was a game of chess, and he enjoyed the challenge. What are you thinking about? Elijah leaned back in his seat, moving his elbows off the table and relaxing his hands in his lap. His broad shoulders and muscular frame filled the majority of the booth, and his hat occupied the little space left. Nothing. Looks like you were thinking about something pleasant. You had a little smile on your face there. Lawrence flushed. Actually, yes. I was thinking about something pleasant. I was thinking, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, about flooring. I'm really fond of the poured concrete look right now. It has a very industrial finish. Elijah blinked. You were thinking about flooring? Lawrence nodded, wetting his lips and pressing his palms together. He grinned behind his hands and tipped his chin down, peering up at Elijah. Yes. Flooring is a big design decision. It can affect the entire aesthetic of the building. Okay, I'll bite. What does the flooring in my place say? It says you don't care about flooring. Elijah exhaled a warm chuckle. What about the rug? It says you don't want to scuff the flooring you don't care about. The couch? Lawrence shook his head. Your entire living room is a hodgepodge of hand-me-downs. You're right. No sense in buying new stuff if the old stuff works. Having an aesthetically pleasing room makes you feel better. It can even add to your productivity if you work inside your house. Clean lines and open spaces can reduce anxiety, and natural light can reduce depression. Really now? The rich man nodded. Yes? The server returned with their food, setting a plate of sizzling meats and vegetables in front of Elijah, and a vegetarian taco salad in front of Lawrence. You expect for me to eat salad? Yeah, Elijah paused, clearing his throat. You look like a salad kind of guy. Lawrence picked up his fork. Oh? I do, Yeah. Try it though. Add the salsa to it. It'll taste good. Of course, he murmured, dumping salsa into the bowl. He ate in silence, stealing glances at Elijah as the other man ate across from him. The cowboy was neat, and he built tortilla wraps with the meats and vegetables, drizzling salsa on top of it. When the cowboy had cleaned his plate, he blotted his lips with a napkin and looked across the table at Lawrence. How is it? It's good. I like it, but I'm getting full. Take it with you for tomorrow's lunch. Lawrence wrinkled his nose. Perhaps not. You can have the rest if you want it. You don't eat leftovers? The cowboy finished his beer. Never mind, don't answer. I'll take it home with me if you don't want it. Why? So, I can eat it tomorrow. No sense in wasting a good meal. Chapter 8. When the server returned, Lawrence took over, requesting the bill and a carry-out container. The woman puckered her lips as she looked between the pair, nodding reluctantly. She returned with the carry-out container first, placing it in the middle of the table. Lawrence frowned and Elijah eyed him. What is it? Elijah popped open the carry-out container, spooning the salad inside of it before closing it again. Nothing. Lawrence watched him, fixing his gaze on his weather-roughened hands. The server breezed back over to them, screwing up her face and placing the bill beside Lawrence's elbow. She shifted her weight and stacked their empty plates, huffing and puffing as she worked. Lawrence clenched his jaws, inhaling a slow breath and sliding his hands over his thighs, shoulders shrugging up as she hovered over them. Elijah glanced between them, gaze lingering on the woman. He narrowed his eyes when he looked back at Lawrence. What is it? Elijah asked again, concentrating his attention on the rich man. Lawrence shook his head again, eyes traveling everywhere but the cowboy's face. I don't want to say anything but, the server started. Elijah tilted his head. Then don't? Well, I just think I should, she sputtered, face flushing pink as she snatched up their used plates and glasses. You clearly asked him out on a date, and when you ask someone out, you're supposed to pay for it. She looked at Lawrence. Don't let him use you for money, just because he's good-looking and pretending to be a cowboy or something. His hat's too nice for it. Cowboys don't walk around with good-looking hats. Lawrence sank down in his seat as he retrieved a crisp $100 bill from his wallet, placing it on the counter and sliding it across the surface towards the server. Elijah reeled backwards. What? His jaw clenched and his kind brown eyes hardened. Palpable anger radiated from him. His lips curled away from his teeth, and he opened his mouth for more words. Here, Lawrence cut Elijah off and pushed the money towards the woman. Keep the change, actually. We're leaving. He grabbed the carry-out container and tugged the shoulder of Elijah's shirt. Leaving, he repeated. Elijah shuddered, muscles rippling down his form. He kept his attention level with the server, and she held his gaze. Both shined with defiance. You have something to say about something that don't concern you. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. My ex-husband was like you. Was he? The cowboy seethed. I'm going to the truck. Lawrence patted Elijah's pockets, groping them for his keys. The man didn't notice. The server grew angrier. Yep. Just like you. He had a pretty smile, a deep voice, and not one red penny to his name. I fell for it, but I'm not letting this young man make the same mistake I made for 10 years. The cowboy eased out of the booth, towering over the woman. A rumble vibrated his chest. His voice was ice. I suggest you keep your damn nose out of other people's business. His hands balled into fists. Gooseflesh covered Lawrence's skin, and he pressed his palm against Elijah's chest, fitting himself between the fuming server and the equally angry cowboy. We should go, Lawrence said, massaging the thin cotton of Elijah's shirt between his fingers. The server scoffed at the cowboy, ignoring his anger. She picked up all the plates and bumped shoulders with Lawrence, peering into his face with a solemn expression. Honey, don't think you have to stay with him. Trust me. Even if the sex is good or he talks a great game when you're in bed together, don't think you have to stay with him. Elijah's anger spiked again, and Lawrence balled his hand in Elijah's shirt, yanking on him. We have to, Lawrence started, but then paused and shook his head. He let Elijah's shirt go. You're angry. You lost our bet, and I think I want my feet rubbed tonight. His voice dropped to a whisper, and he patted Elijah's chest. With a nod to the server, he headed to the exit. The cowboy snapped out of his anger. What? No. The server folded her arms across her chest. Lawrence glimpsed the confusion on her features as he stepped out of the establishment. The sun warmed his skin. The cowboy caught up to him as he reached the vehicle and leaned against the passenger door. He planted one hand on the truck and glared at Lawrence. Don't give me your sour baby look. Lawrence wrinkled his eyebrows. I didn't lose. You did. You said you wouldn't get angry. No, I said I wouldn't remark about your money or your life. Well, I'm including this whole display as a remark on my money. No, you're not. I didn't make a remark on your money, so I haven't lost. You can't change the rules at your own whim. You being angry about the whole situation is a remark on my money. Were you not frustrated because she assumed you were using me? Why wouldn't I get upset about it? It's bullshit. So, you feel like if it had been a real date, you should have paid? Sure, yeah. If it was a real date, I would have wanted to pay. Why? We don't have to abide by those silly rules. Because I would want to. What if I like paying? Lawrence asked. It's weird. Why? I have plenty of money I can spend on whatever I want. If I want to spend my money on lunches and dinners, who are you to stop me? The cowboy eased off the truck. I want to take care of you. And you can take care of me without having $1 million and paying for everything, Lawrence spat, sliding his hands around the car door handle before he froze. He turned his head back to the cowboy in slow increments. What did you say? The cowboy licked his full lips. I want to take care of you. The second time Elijah said it didn't make it any less shocking than the first time. Lawrence's head spun, and he braced himself against the vehicle. No. We would never work. Lawrence pulled at the truck's door handle, but the vehicle was locked. Why not? Lawrence spun on his heels, inhaling a deep breath and then sighing slowly. He closed his eyes, centering himself. There are too many reasons to list right now. Start listing. I don't live here. You take painting classes in Paris. You can live wherever you want. Lawrence worked his jaws, nibbling the inside of his cheek as his anger bubbled tears to his eyes. I'm turning your land into vacation homes. Now unlock the doors so we can go to the automotive store. The fire evaporated from Elijah's eyes. The fight left him. Yeah, he grunted, voice soft, we can go. He moved around the vehicle, unlocking the doors in silence. Chapter 9. Elijah suffered through the rest of Monday with Lawrence. They went to his hotel room, and the cowboy lingered outside as Lawrence browsed through his clothes, changing from his suit to a fitted collared shirt and a pair of designer jeans. They hugged his pert ass and accented his lean muscular legs. He walked the smaller man through ordering the necessary vehicle parts, and they ate a quiet dinner at a different restaurant. By the end of the night, Lawrence decided he would rather be at the cowboy's log cabin than in the little town. Lawrence had also left his most important belongings in Elijah's place, so Elijah reluctantly loaded the man's suitcase into the back seat. They drove back to the mountains in silence, and Elijah went straight to the couch once they arrived. He couldn't shake Lawrence's words or his own. He didn't know where his declaration came from, but he knew it was true once the words left his mouth. Lawrence had lived with him for 3 days, and he had already forgotten his life before the witty spitfire entered it. Bickering with Lawrence added a strange joy to his day, and his sly little smiles heated him up inside. With Lawrence, his natural instincts kicked in, and for the first time in his life, he wanted to provide for another person. No, he needed to provide for another person. Now he understood all the quirky habits of the stallions he captured and gelded. He understood the fights, the tail-waving, and the showing off. He wanted to be the flashiest option for Lawrence, too. He wanted to impress the other man with everything he had, because he didn't want Lawrence's attention anywhere besides him. He fell asleep thinking about Lawrence's green eyes, his full lips, and sweet tenor voice, and he woke up with the sun. For a moment, he forgot the other man had confiscated his bedroom, but a rush of arousal reminded him. The cowboy groaned, shielding his face with his forearm as he willed his harden away. When his morning excitement dissipated, he climbed off the couch, cooking himself and Lawrence a quick breakfast. He left the other man's breakfast on the table covered with plastic wrap and put on his usual attire, faded blue jeans and a button-down shirt. His morning routine started with dressing his gelding for the day. He slipped the Mustang a treat after he strapped the saddle and bridle on. Elijah checked the shelters first, mucking them and laying fresh bedding as the sun advanced in the sky. Once the temperatures crept up, he rode the perimeter of the fence, starting at the entrance and following the winding path. 3/4 of the way through, he noticed a figure in the pasture. The figure had the rich man's casual gait. The cowboy pressed his lips together and veered off his path, walking his horse to the figure. It was Lawrence, wearing one of Elijah's button-down shirts, one of Elijah's hats, and his own sneakers. The hat didn't fit. It sank down on Lawrence's head. The shirt hung on him too. Elijah stifled a chuckle as he came up beside Lawrence. "Can I help you, sir?" Lawrence tipped his hat back. "I want to help." The cowboy laughed. "Help me do what?" "Whatever you do out here. I want to see why you love this place so much." The gelding paced, impatient with the conversation. "Right. Well, I already did the hard work. Right now, I'm walking the fence to make sure it's all good. I can help you." "Ah. I only have one ready to ride." "Then, take his saddle off and we can ride together." Elijah eyed Lawrence. "Fine. For a little bit, and only because you're light." The cowboy eased off the horse and removed the saddle and blanket, resting it over the fence. "You ever ridden bareback before?" Lawrence tilted his head. "Horses." The cowboy whistled. "Yeah. Horses." "No." "Well, okay. You have to act like you're still in a saddle as much as you can. Keep your feet parallel with the ground, back straight, move with the horse." "How am I supposed to get on?" "Carefully," Elijah teased. "I'll lift you." Lawrence sealed his lips together as he stepped over to Elijah and faced the horse. "You want to grab his reins and a little of his mane to brace yourself. Then throw your right leg over when I lift you. Ease steady, don't worry." Elijah rested his hands on Lawrence's waist, sliding them across his toned stomach. "Ready?" he rumbled. "Yes." With a grunt, he lifted Lawrence in the air, and Lawrence followed directions. The gelding altered his weight, turning his head to the side as the reins shifted and taking a few steps forward. The animal settled again, and Elijah approached, patting its neck and feeding it a hay cube from his pocket. "Oh." Lawrence shifted as the horse moved, squeezing his thighs around the animal. The cowboy cleared his throat and took the reins from Lawrence, kicking himself up onto the horse the same way. He slid into the dip of the horse's back, thick thighs flanking Lawrence. Strong hands gripped the reins, and he rested his forearms on the other man's thighs. The horse trotted forward again, jostling Lawrence while Elijah stayed erect. He pulled the other man close to him, steadying him with his body. "Oh," Lawrence murmured again, leaning back into Elijah. "Are you comfortable?" "As comfortable as I am going to be on the back of a horse," Lawrence replied. "All right." Elijah clicked his tongue, and the gelding shifted into a lazy trot. He guided the creature back to the fence perimeter and continued the lazy pace. The horse's body stirred under him, sliding him into Lawrence's back, and then rocking Lawrence into his lap, putting Lawrence's firm ass right against his crotch. "So what are we doing right now?" "Checking the fence. Gotta check it every day to make sure it's secure." "And then?" Lawrence breathed. "After this it's lunchtime, and after lunch I'm going to work out some of the mares." "Tell me about them." "Well, all right." Elijah relaxed behind Lawrence. They fit together, especially with the slight difference in build. Lawrence wasn't tiny, but he hadn't worked outside his entire life. He didn't have the same compact muscles Elijah had. His muscles were lean, perhaps from running or lifting weights in the gym. Stamina, but he would be sore after one day of fieldwork. "I don't give them names because I don't want to get attached." "Why not?" Because once they're trained enough, I'm going to rehome them." People like the idea of training a horse themselves, but they don't want it to be fresh from the wild. They want a little something in there before they start trying to add a saddle and a rider. What if the horse is okay with the first part and will never take to the second part? Elijah shrugged. "It's usually not the case. If I see a horse with too many behavior problems, I just keep it or rehome it to a sanctuary. Some people have bigger spaces than me and only take horses who are wild at heart." "Wild at heart?" "It's what they like to call the ones that are impossible to work with." "Oh, I see. What about this one we're on now?" "What about him?" "I assume you are keeping him because I've seen you ride him every day." "Yeah, I'll probably keep him a while. He likes to work, so it's easy to get him saddled up for the day. It makes the whole job easier when you have an animal that likes working." "Is it hard to find an animal who likes working?" "Is it hard to find a person who likes working?" Elijah shot back. Lawrence hummed, resting his hands over Elijah's, fingers brushing over the leather reins. "It's not always easy. Some people enjoy working for others. They don't like being in charge." Horses are similar. It's also about how you train too. If you train them in a positive way, they'll be more into working because they see it as spending time with you. You know what I mean? "Ah." Lawrence nodded. "I see." Elijah nudged the gelding's side, and the animal shifted directions, resuming his casual stroll in the new direction. "We don't have to talk about horses." "No, I like this conversation. Tell me more about how you work with them." "Well?" The cowboy wet his lips as the wind rusted through Lawrence's hair. The auburn locks brushed his face, tickling his lips and nose. "My father taught me how to break them in, but I don't like the method he was using. He would force things on them and then wait until they got used to it, so a lot of times we had horses who would run away from getting bridled or saddled." "How do you do it then?" "I've been trying positive reinforcement techniques and what other people do with their horses and developing some methods that work for wild mustangs. You can't work with a feral animal the same way you work with an animal who's been with humans. The hardest part is getting them to trust you. So when I get a new horse in, I let them roam, get used to the new area. After a few weeks, I'll start working with it." "How?" "With treats. Horses are prey animals, so they can spook easy, but once they're used to the pasture and start feeling comfortable with my presence around and everything, I'll start walking up to them with treats. Sometimes you'll get a horse who don't quite know what a treat is, so you'll use other horses until they get curious. It's why I keep all the different training levels together." "When do you work with them?" "About every day during the afternoons and evenings." They reached the entrance to the pasture, and Elijah passed the reins to Lawrence and slid off the back of his horse, rubbing the animal's side once his boots hit the ground. Lawrence clung to the ropes and peered down at Elijah. You getting off, or what? The cowboy squinted up at Lawrence. The rich man was a sad excuse for a field worker, but he was cute on top of the gelding, wearing clothes a size too big for him. Lawrence turned emerald green eyes to the cowboy and parted his plump lips. Yes? All right. He gripped the reins in his hand as he kicked his right leg over the horse's spine and slipped down his back, stumbling onto the ground between the gelding's body and Elijah's. He fell into the cowboy, and their bodies connected. Elijah roped an arm around Lawrence's torso, helping him steady himself. You good? Yes. Ah, yes. Lawrence gasped, gripping the hems of Elijah's undershirt. He gathered his footing and peered up at the other man. His green eyes sparkled. Hi. The gelding lowered his head and locked his joints, muscles shuddering as the animal relaxed. Elijah looked from the horse to Lawrence, swallowing around a growing knot in his throat. Hey, he grunted. How are you feeling? Good. He quirked an eyebrow. Lawrence's hands moved over Elijah's body, groping him with his thin shirt as a barrier. I mean about yesterday. I'm sorry about what I said. Why? Elijah's eyelids fluttered. If it's true, you don't have to be sorry. Lawrence pressed his lips together as he gazed into Elijah's eyes. Adoration and lust mixed together as the rich man's pupils dilated and his lips parted again. He lifted his chin and closed the last sliver of distance between them, holding onto Elijah's hips. It hurt your feelings though, and I knew it would. I'm sorry for it. Lawrence leaned forward and his breath warmed Elijah's lips. He glanced into Elijah's eyes and back at his lips before he captured Elijah's lips with his own. The cowboy froze in his spot, moaning into the kiss. He lifted his hands to Lawrence's face, cupping his cheeks. Lawrence's initial kiss was soft, gentle, and the cowboy pulled back, panting. His nostrils flared with his heavy breaths, and his eyes roamed over Lawrence's flushed cheeks and bright eyes before he pressed their lips together again. Elijah devoured Lawrence, tasting the caverns of his mouth. Spicy peppermint lingered on Lawrence's tongue. Elijah growled. Excitement swirled inside him as he stepped away from Lawrence. He ground his teeth together and his cock strained his jeans. Lawrence's face flamed, and he looked down at Elijah's crotch, shivering. He dragged his eyes back to the man's face. I should go, he breathed. Where? Back to the house. I thought you wanted to watch me work out the horses. Elijah coughed. Lawrence scrubbed his cheeks. He looked towards the rest of the pasture, scanning the area. I do. Good, then come on. I've got a few treats, but there are some more in the shed next to the house. Elijah slipped the gelding's bridle off his head and patted his neck, releasing him from working. The horse trotted to the side and lowered his head, nudging Elijah's pockets. Nope, you're done for the day, he replied to the horse's silent questions. What is he doing? He wants snacks. We'll give him something if he follows us to the shed. Elijah led Lawrence to the shed, loading the man's pockets with treats before they entered the pasture again. The gelding accepted 2 treats before Elijah cut him off and shooed him away. They spent the rest of the afternoon working with the other mares and geldings. While Elijah worked on desensitizing 2 mares to bridles and 1 gelding to a saddle, Lawrence worked with the skittish horses, laying treats on the ground and coaxing them closer. The process was experimental, but at the end of the 3 hours of working, Lawrence had made 1 new horse friend. His new friend, a brown mustang with a star on her forehead, followed him back to the edge of the pasture, nickering for his attention. She likes you, Elijah nodded to the horse. She wants more treats. Lawrence snorted, glancing at the female as he climbed over the fence out of the pasture. Treats fell from his pockets, and Elijah chuckled. The horse snatched the treats up. You want to try slipping a halter over her head? She might let you. Elijah offered Lawrence a halter. You haven't done it yet. I tried a few days ago before you got here, but I haven't worked with her since. I've been concentrating on the other gelding, getting him broken in and ready to be adopted. Oh? I don't know how to put it on. Slip it over her nose and then latch it. Should I give her treats? Elijah hummed. How many has she had so far? I believe quite a bit, but the ones you gave me. It's healthy for her, isn't it? It's not bad for her, no, but horses are grazing animals, so you can't feed them too much at once. The mare's ears swiveled forwards and backwards, and she nickered at Lawrence. She really likes you, huh? Who knew you were horse people? The cowboy handed Lawrence a peppermint. Here. I'm not horse people. Lawrence took it. Sure you are. Offer her this if you get the halter on. What do I do, though? Elijah shrugged. Whatever works, but be gentle. You want to work on desensitizing her to it, so play with it a little bit. You know, get her used to what it is. Ah. Lawrence thumbed the old rope halter in his hands as he looked at the mare. She spooked, jumping backwards before propping her ears forward again. As the halter brushed her nose, she lifted her head back. It's okay, cutie. The wary mare eyed the halter, blinking glassy eyes before she sniffed it. Curious but not put off. Lawrence tried again, brushing the ropes over her long nose and around her forehead. He bit his bottom lip as he got closer to her perked ears. Relax, Elijah rumbled. If you're nervous, she'll be nervous. Lawrence sighed, tense muscles releasing. The halter flopped over one ear, and the mare blinked. Lawrence pulled back, sliding it over her skin more. Elijah nodded. Good. After a few more attempts, Lawrence had the halter around the horse's thick neck. He slipped the second part around the horse's nose before she spooked again and trotted away from him. What do I do now? Lawrence hissed. Give it a second. The mare paced and settled reluctantly, locking her legs. Lawrence approached, lifting the halter tighter. How do I secure it? Slip the end through the loop and knot it. Okay. He fit the end in the loop, and the mare danced away from him again. It took 3 rounds of their back and forth before he finally secured the halter on the horse's head, and it had been 30 minutes of work. Lawrence wiped a light sheen of sweat off his brow. It's hard work, isn't it? Elijah smirked. Now, why don't you clip a lead to it and walk her around before you take it off? You can't leave it on her, it's dangerous. So I will have to put it back on tomorrow. Yeah, you will, but it'll be easier. Lawrence clipped a lead to the halter and stepped backwards. The horse put on the brakes, dropping her weight on her back legs. He yanked at her, but her full half-ton body didn't budge. The rich boy looked at Elijah. What do I do now? Lure her. Give her the peppermint, and see if you can get her to take a couple steps with you. Lawrence dug the peppermint out of his pocket and presented it to the horse. She redistributed her weight on her legs and stretched her neck forward. When she took a shaky step forward, he rewarded her with the peppermint and heavy praise. A smile lit up Elijah's face as he watched Lawrence work with the animal. The horse brought out the gentle, nurturing side of the stern businessman. So, what are you thinking about those vacation homes now? Lawrence looked up after leading the horse in a circle. The smile dropped from his face. Oh. It's a maybe. Chapter 10. After working with Elijah Tuesday afternoon and working on his computer most of the evening, Lawrence collapsed into the cowboy's bed and fell into a deep sleep. His muscles ached from working outside, and his skin had taken on a bronze color. Freckles touched his cheeks, and a sun-kissed glow painted his arms. He slept late Wednesday morning, waking up when his cell phone rang on the bedside table. He snatched it and put it to his ear as he answered the call. Hello? He mumbled, sleep weighing on his voice. Hello. Is this Mr. Lawrence? The man on the other end sputtered, struggling with Lawrence's last name. Yes. This is he. We're calling to let you know half of your car parts are here. The other half of them were shipped yesterday and should be arriving tomorrow. Oh. Lawrence sobered and bolted upright, combing his fingers through his wild curls. Thank you. We'll be there this evening to pick them up. No problem. We close at 9:30 tonight. Okay. Thank you again. Lawrence ended the phone call and leapt out of bed, tramping through Elijah's house in his briefs and a fitted undershirt. He found the cowboy leaning against the kitchen counter with a sandwich in one hand and a glass of water in the other, alternating which hand went to his mouth. The man's hat rested next to him, and he already smelled like hours of hard work. Lawrence bit his bottom lip and paused at the kitchen entrance. The cowboy looked up, gazing at him through a shade of thick eyelashes. "Mornin'," he smirked. "Hi. You working with your mare today?" "I may be." The automotive place called and said half of the parts are available for pickup. I figured we could go get them, and I could buy you dinner." "You asking me out?" Elijah finished his sandwich and gulped the last of his water, rinsing the glass and putting it away. Lawrence wet his lips. "Yes," he nodded, "I am." "Well then, I'll just have you know. I'm not like all those other girls you date. If you think I'm giving it up because you bought me dinner, you have another thing coming," Elijah teased. I don't think that." Lawrence's eyes widened, and he shuffled out of the way as the cowboy stepped out of the kitchen, whipping his head around and watching him move through the living room. The cowboy paused at his hat rack and kicked one leg out, resting his weight on one side. Lawrence's eyes trailed down the cowboy's back, resting on the seat of his jeans and the outline of his round ass. It was a solid handful. Firm and mouth-watering. "Good," Elijah shot back. "You ready, or you gonna stand there all day?" "Oh. Right. Let me get dressed." Lawrence returned to the cowboy's room, leaving the door open as he dug through his suitcase, dressing in a pair of brightly colored shorts and a collared shirt. "I'll be outside in the supply shed. Also, we need to swing by the feed store too." "Okay. For the horses?" "Yeah. I'm almost ready." "All right. I'll be outside." The door opened and closed, leaving Lawrence to the rest of his routine. He brushed his teeth, washed his face, and grabbed the prepared breakfast Elijah made for him from the refrigerator. Grits, eggs, and sausage this morning. Lawrence had been used to lighter breakfasts and early lunches, but he preferred Elijah's hearty breakfasts instead, perhaps because Elijah made it himself with his own hands every morning. It meant he crossed the cowboy's mind. It meant the cowboy wanted to feed him, to care for him, even despite their arguments. Lawrence warmed the food and stirred it together, taking small bites as he put on his shoes and met Elijah at the shed. "I'm ready." "Good." They piled into the truck with Elijah in the driver's seat and Lawrence in the passenger seat and drove to town. Lawrence ate along the way, finishing half of his meal and surrendering the leftovers to Elijah, who ate them without question. The cowboy hummed along to twanging country music as Lawrence worked, answering emails and text messages. When they arrived and rolled to the first stoplight, the cowboy turned off the radio and looked at Lawrence. "Do you want to go pick up the parts or go to the feed store first?" "It doesn't matter." Lawrence stashed his cell phone away. "Which one closes earlier?" "The feed store closes in about 2 hours. The auto shop closes later. Don't remember when, but later." 9:30. "Yeah. Let's go to the feed store first then." Elijah nodded. Old trucks filled the feed store's parking lot, and men loitered outside. Cowboy hats shaded their face as they smoked cigarettes and talked. Elijah parked, waving at the other shoppers as he guided Lawrence inside. "I'll be quick. I don't need much, but I like to keep certain things on hand." He grabbed a cart and wheeled it to the equine area, plucking supplies off the shelf. Lawrence wandered forward, eyeing the halters and other horse accessories. The halters Elijah had were weathered, brown, and faded from age. They had started black but were now a patchy gray. They frayed on the sides, and the leather had cracked from sun damage and age. "Are you buying new halters?" "The ones I have work fine." Elijah grabbed treats from the shelf, tossing them in the basket. "I don't like them." "Ah," the cowboy snorted. "What don't you like about them?" "They're old and boring. These are pretty colors, and I want to get one for Molly." "For who?" "Molly. The mare I worked with yesterday. I named her Molly." "I don't think Molly needs special equipment." Elijah wrinkled his forehead. Well, I think she does, and I think she needs a pretty rope halter. Lawrence pulled a pink and purple halter off the shelf and handed it to Elijah. The halter had a combination of rope and nylon elements, and it was fancier than the plain rope halters Elijah already had. The cowboy surveyed it, turning it over in his hands. Looks fine and sturdy, but it's $90. Okay, and? $90 for a horse that may not have a home in 3 weeks is excessive, and I told you not to get attached. Lawrence snatched the halter back and put it in the cart. You told me why you don't get attached. You didn't say anything about me not getting attached. Yeah, I guess when you can buy half the city, a little old harness is nothing. Lawrence rolled his eyes. You're right, it's nothing. I think she'll look cute in it. He added a pale blue nylon lead to the cart as well. You're not going to get a matching pink one? No. Blue, purple, and pink go together, but they're not matchy-matchy. Sure. Lawrence moved to the next aisle, browsing the bridles, headstalls, and breastplates. What all do you need for your horse? Elijah followed him. The gelding? You should give him a name. We already talked about this. You ride him every morning, and you work alongside him all day. You should give him a name. What about Romeo? Lawrence picked black leather bridle and breastplate set with light pattern detailing, presenting it to Elijah. Why Romeo? Because he's a beautiful horse. Elijah sighed. Fine. Romeo doesn't need this expensive set. Not need, but it's beautiful, and you will use it daily. Protesting will do no good. It's my money, and I would like to spend it on items for the horses. Fine. Elijah shook his head and wheeled the cart to the front of the store. Did y'all find everything okay? An older woman behind the counter asked them, as Elijah unloaded the items onto the counter. Yes. We found everything we were looking for. Lawrence pulled his wallet out of his pocket, propping it on the counter as she rang the items. The total climbed to the hundreds and then the 200s, and the cowboy shifted his weight, peering over the older woman's head. The woman scanned the supplies and nudged them to the side as she grabbed riding gear, holding up the pink and purple bridle. I was hoping someone would buy this one. I love this design combination of the nylon and the rope. Me too, Lawrence chimed in. It's for a special horse. Elijah rehabilitates and trains wild mustangs. We're in the process of gentle breaking a very sweet mare. Oh, really? The woman looked at Elijah with a quizzical expression on her face. Her eyebrows knit together, and her head tilted to the side. You've been coming here for years, and I had no idea you trained them. We've been looking for someone to work with one of ours. I bet Elijah could help you. He's amazing with horses. Lawrence touched the cowboy's shoulder. You should meet his horse Romeo. It's another one of the wild mustangs, but now he's so gentle and loves to work every day. He meets Elijah at the fence every morning, Lawrence gushed. The woman's smile grew as Lawrence talked. My mother always said you could tell a man by the way he treats his pets. Any man with short patience with animals won't have any patience with children later. Either making them or raising them. Oh, Elijah's great with the animals. Lawrence winked. Full of patience. The cowboy cleared his throat and craned his neck at Lawrence. We need to get going. The apples of his cheeks darkened. The cashier rang up all their riding supplies and announced the total. The cowboy's eyes swelled, but Lawrence shrugged and handed the woman several crisp dollar bills. I'd like to call you about my horse. Do you have a business card or something? The woman fixed her gaze on Elijah. He left them in the truck, but I have one. Lawrence produced a modern business card from the back of his wallet, placing it face down on the counter. He can write his information on the back of it for you, and I will take these items to the truck. Can I get the keys? Yeah, Elijah mumbled, digging them out of his pocket and surrendering them to Lawrence. Lawrence patted Elijah's shoulder and loaded the cart again, wheeling it outside to the vehicle. He loaded the smaller things in the back seat and heaved the heavier things on the bed of the truck, panting when he was finished, and he deposited the cart back at the entrance of the building, peeking inside at the same time. Sure. Horses are great pets for kids as long as the horse has some good training. Elijah nodded. That's what I want. I want a good horse for her. I really think it's the previous training that wasn't so good. Lawrence moved inside the building again, touching his hands to Elijah's back and peering at the woman over the cowboy's shoulder. I thought we had to get going. Oh? Yeah? Elijah ducked his head and then turned towards Lawrence. Did you get everything loaded in the truck? Everything except you. Well, you should know better than to get a cowboy talking about horses, the older woman behind the counter laughed. My mistake. Lawrence flashed a smile. 5 more minutes then. No. Elijah pushed the business card across the counter. We really do need to get going. Give me a call whenever you're ready to set something up. I will. Thanks for the information and the techniques. We'll give them a try too. The woman waved as Lawrence inched Elijah to the exit. The cowboy climbed into the vehicle and buckled himself in before looking at Lawrence, staring at him. Lawrence's skin burned under Elijah's hard gaze, and his heart galloped in his chest. His eyes drooped closed. Thank you, Elijah said. For what you did in there. She may adopt one of the horses. If nothing else, I'm pretty sure I'm going to train one for her. Ah? My car parts? Lawrence lifted his eyebrows. We're going. We have plenty of time. Lawrence nodded, and Elijah cranked the vehicle, driving to the automotive parts store. Inside, Lawrence handed the cashier his debit card, and an employee and Elijah loaded the parts into the back of the truck. Elijah purchased a few bottles of motor oil, antifreeze, and other car lubricants before exiting the shop behind Lawrence. I still want to eat. Will this be safe in the back of the truck? I can move them to the inside if you want to. I'd prefer you do. Elijah rolled his tongue around in his mouth and lifted his eyebrows with a sigh. No problem. He chuckled. Where do you want to eat then? You pick a place and you order for me too. I like it when you pick something for me. Why? Elijah started the vehicle again and cruised around the town, scoping out eateries as he drove. Because? I also like paying for the meal. I can pay for us, you know. I know. They pulled into the parking lot of a quiet diner, and Elijah moved the parts from the bed of the truck to the seats, promising to move them again once they head out. He walked alongside Lawrence inside and requested a booth for 2. Lawrence smiled and stood a half step behind Elijah as he spoke, watching his easy confidence. Watching Elijah made Lawrence hungry for him and curious. He wanted to know how the cowboy played, and the questions bubbled to the front of his brain. He imagined the cowboy on top of him, covering him with his bulky body and threading their fingers together. He craved that intimacy from this stranger who had wormed his way into Lawrence's heart. Chapter 11. You ready? The cowboy looked back at him, full lips tugging into a light smirk as his dark eyes landed on Lawrence's face. Lawrence sucked in his breath, heart fluttering. Yes, he murmured, following the cowboy to a booth and sitting down across from him. The host handed them menus, but Lawrence didn't open his. Instead, he sat back and crossed his legs, placing his hands over his lap and surveying the restaurant. He eyed the Wild West decorations, curling his lips at the mounted antlers and horns as the server approached their table. Elijah ordered their drinks, appetizers, and main courses before handing the menus over and regarding Lawrence again. What's on your mind? I was thinking about how nice Romeo will look with his new gear. Oh yeah. Lawrence nodded, studying the wood grain of the table before looking at Elijah again. How much do you make monthly? What? I mean, what do you do for money? How are you supporting the horses? What kind of long-term plan do you have? Usually I can turn one out in a couple months, and I tend to live off the earnings from selling them. Sometimes, like Romeo, I could keep him for a long time, make him bomb-proof, and get a good bit off him. You're going to sell Romeo? Lawrence blinked. Yeah, I'll sell him if I have to. I mean, all the horses are for sale now, and I update their prices when I feel like they're worth more. I mean, I've saddled every one of them at least once to make sure it can be done and they're not wild, but just because you get one saddled doesn't mean they're trained. I see. Have you considered really making money from this? I mean, perhaps a couple thousand a month, at least. I don't train horses because I'm trying to get rich. I train them because I love it. Elijah frowned. I know you do, but you still have to eat, and you deserve to live comfortably. I think you could build a stable, and have a boarding place, and a training area for your wild mustangs and your boarders. Boarding horses can be easy, right? You would bring them in at night, and let them out during the day? Something like that. How much would it cost to build it? It's hard to say. You can get prefab ones, or you can do a whole new build yourself. The real issue is deciding how big you want to make it in the beginning, how many horses you want to house. How much does it cost to board a horse? Round here, I'd say probably 600. A little more if training is involved or something, but remember, there's a lot of work that comes with keeping horses. Realistically, I'd have to hire someone. But it doesn't matter anyway. We shouldn't be talking about trying to expand with more horses when I need to focus on getting rid of the ones I have, Elijah grunted. I'm thinking about money avenues for you. I see that, but I don't need your help being profitable. The cowboy bristled. You're getting upset. Damn right I'm getting upset. You're over here talking about some barn future when we already know what you want to do with the land. You think I'm going to magically find some other piece of land for a barn? You already know what I want to do. Lawrence jerked his head back. I suppose you know me so well then? I do. I know your type. How good did it make you feel to buy something for the horses earlier? Did getting a little bridle and lead set fill you up with the warm fuzzies so you could forget about what may have to happen if I can't get them all rehomed? No. Wait, what may have to happen? See, this is what I can't stand about you people. You think money, gifts, and donations solve everything. Stealing some land is okay if you just donate some money and a little time. Makes up for wanting to put rows of vacation homes on a good plot of land and displacing more wildlife. Elijah's anger vibrated off him. I'm not like that. Then you're a damn liar too. He tossed his napkin on the table and stood up, bumping the table and vibrating the glasses and silverware. Where are you going? Outside, he hissed. Don't follow me. Lawrence curled his lips away from his teeth as Elijah stomped to the door, leaving his upturned hat on the seat. When Elijah disappeared, Lawrence's attention fixed on the hat, memorizing its smooth felt texture as his stomach twisted in knots and tears brimmed his eyes. The server approached their table, delivering a fried onion appetizer with 3 colorful dipping sauces. Here you go. Lawrence shuddered. See, can you make our food to go, please? Oh, you don't want to eat this right now? We can't, he choked, pulling his wallet out of his pocket and handing her his bank card. The server took the bank card and slipped it in her apron, touching the back of Lawrence's seat. Is everything okay? No, but everything will be. He bit his bottom lip and glanced towards the exit before back at the woman. Thank you. Concern colored her features, but she nodded, taking the appetizer with her as she stepped away from the table, leaving Lawrence by himself. He ran his hands down his thighs before reaching across the table and grabbing Elijah's hat. He thumbed over the smooth felt and traced the brim. It smelled like Elijah, like pine and fresh linen, and his thoughts drifted to the cowboy. His mind conjured pictures of Elijah's smiling face and his understanding brown eyes. The server returned with Lawrence's card and a bag full of food, placing both on the table in front of the man. Here you go. Lawrence pocketed his bank card. Thank you. Is there anything else I can get you? No thanks. The corners of his lips lifted in a weak smile. She retreated, and he signed the receipt, leaving a generous tip. He exited the building with Elijah's hat in one hand and the food in the other, walking up to the truck. "I told you not to follow me," Elijah rumbled. "You left your hat." "You don't listen." "No, I'm listening just fine. You said not to follow you, but I'm not going to sit in a restaurant by myself after my date stormed off. What's your deal?" Elijah snatched his hat from Lawrence and fitted on his head. "You're holding it wrong." "So? Do I look like a cowboy?" "I'm so sorry, I don't know proper hat-holding etiquette." "You'll ruin the brim." "Who fucking cares?" "I care. It's important. Hats aren't cheap." "Oh no, I'm sorry, they're real cheap for you." "My mistake." "It's always about money, isn't it?" "Yeah. It's always about money." "It's not for me." "Because you have enough money for it to not be about money. It's a simple cause and effect." "Whatever," Lawrence scoffed. "I got us the food." He thrusted the bag of carry-out containers at Elijah. "Yep. What now? You can't possibly have a problem with me agreeing to buy the food like I said I would." "I'm not." Elijah snatched the food from him, putting it on the floor of the back seat and returning his attention to Lawrence. "Fine. Don't look at me like that." The rich man wrinkled his nose and turned his back to the cowboy. "Fine." Elijah grabbed his arm and spun him around, yanking their bodies together and meshing their lips together. His grip relaxed as he devoured Lawrence, slipping his tongue past his lips and exploring the caverns of his mouth. Lawrence stood there stunned, angry, and thrilled at the same time. The cowboy kissed with the same passion he fought with, and Lawrence drowned in it. When the cowboy pulled back, Lawrence's head spun. His lips tingled from the rough sensations, and his heart galloped in his chest. Lawrence flicked his eyes up to Elijah, and excitement burned inside him. He was hungry for the cowboy. Ravenous. His cock strained the front of his jeans, and goosebumps chased a shiver down his spine. Lawrence cleared his throat, biting the back of his middle finger. "Yeah." In one fluid movement, the cowboy moved their carry-out containers and pushed Lawrence into the back seat of the truck. He climbed in behind him, closing the door and wrestling with too many body parts and too many layers of clothing. The cowboy ripped his button-down off and yanked his belt buckle loose. Lawrence watched, eyes growing wide. "Oh." He glimpsed the shadow of Elijah's cock and shivered, eyelids fluttering. The cowboy reached for Lawrence's pants, slipping the button from its hole and folding them down his hips. He pushed his collared shirt up, exposing his lean muscled chest and dark nipples. The shirt dug into Lawrence's back, and the seams ripped. "Eli," Lawrence whispered, pressing his palms into the cowboy's bare chest, blunt nails dug into his skin. "Yeah?" he panted, turning intense eyes to Lawrence. Lawrence shook his head. He gripped the cowboy's tight curls and pulled him into another kiss as his body arched up. His exposed cock slid over the cowboy's abdominals as their chests connected. Elijah gripped the door behind Lawrence with one hand while the other trailed down Lawrence's body. His thumb brushed over hard nipples, teasing them with rough affection before he moved on, wrapping his hand around Lawrence's cock. Lawrence bucked into his hand. Fire spread through him as the cowboy stroked his length, as people laughed in the parking lot. Thin aluminum walls separated them from the strangers retreating to their vehicles. The cowboy kissed him again, bruising his lips, his jawline, and his neck. He traveled down, brushing his lips over his nipples and following a dripping line of curly hair to his cock. "Oh goodness," Lawrence breathed. "I'm gonna suck you dry," the cowboy warned, voice husky as he mouthed over Lawrence's cock, lips moving against it. "Oh okay." He melted into the old leather seats. "Do you want me to fuck you?" His hot breath tickled Lawrence's already blazing skin, and Lawrence dropped his head back on his shoulders. His cock hardened against Elijah's lips, and a drop of precum worked through him. Elijah passed his tongue across the head of Lawrence's cock. Lawrence moaned. "My God, yes." His muscles tensed, cock flexing and slapping the cowboy's cheek. "Sorry." Elijah exhaled in a heady chuckle. "Yeah?" His tongue traveled up all sides of Lawrence's cock before he sucked him into his mouth. Lawrence lifted his head, watching his cock disappear past Elijah's full lips and feeling himself in the back of the cowboy's throat. The cowboy's mouth worked around him. His cheeks hollowed as he sucked him, and saliva collected around the corners of his mouth, seeping past his lips and staining Lawrence's pants. Oh fuck. Yes. I want you inside me. He lost his breath after his confession, drunk from Elijah's skills and the overwhelming pleasure spreading through his entire body. Elijah dragged an orgasm out of him, and Lawrence stared in shock as the cowboy retreated, swallowing and licking his lips. I figured you tasted good, he growled. His shining lips quirked into a mischievous smirk as he covered Lawrence again, kissing the corner of his lips. He nestled himself between Lawrence's thighs and spit on his fingers, carrying the moisture between their bodies and massaging Lawrence's hole. Lawrence wrapped an arm around Elijah's shoulders, digging his nails into his back. Fuck me, Eli, he murmured, kissing the cowboy's cheek, then capturing his lips. The cowboy trembled, muscles shuddering under brown skin. Rough fingers circled Lawrence's hole. He fingered him until his patience ran out, and he replaced his finger with his cock, stretching Lawrence as he eased inside of him. Lawrence groaned, nails clawing Elijah's shoulders. He dented the cowboy's flesh and dragged his nails across rough skin as he buried his face in the cowboy's neck. Fuck, he whispered, rocking his hips and adjusting to the invasion. The cowboy rooted himself inside Lawrence, folding him in half. The backseat was cramped. Lawrence's feet touched the ceiling. His head thumped against the tinted glass with each one of Elijah's hard thrusts, but those things added to his pleasure. His stomach flittered each time the cowboy grunted, each time his shoulders rolled over the body of the door and pressed into the window. Lawrence's sweaty skin left haphazard streaks. The heat emanating off them fogged the windows. The inside of the vehicle was impossibly hot. The cowboy dripped with sweat. It rolled over his broad shoulders and sailed down his chest. Lawrence's cock jumped between their bodies, pulsing against Elijah's torso, sticking to his wet skin. I'm getting close, he confessed, brushing his lips over Elijah's shoulder, tasting the sweat from his skin. Yeah? Nut all over my chest. Gimme that nut. Lawrence's face filled with warmth at the cowboy's harsh words. His mouth went dry, but his orgasm raced up on him. His eyes crossed before focusing on the grayed beads of sweat painting Elijah's skin. They accumulated, joining together and letting gravity drag them across rough terrain. You want my nut? Lawrence murmured, stomach exploding with electricity. His cock pulsed. Yeah, I want it, Elijah growled, slamming his hips into Lawrence's ass. Elijah pinned him against the seat with one strong hand, rolling his hips and slapping his balls against Lawrence's body. Lawrence moaned into his orgasm, biting Elijah's shoulder and clawing his skin. His eyes squeezed shut and his body tightened around the cowboy, pulsing with every wave of pleasure. His abdominals clenched as his cock exploded with cum, painting ropes of watery white fluid over Elijah's sweaty body. The cowboy groaned at the bite. His hips stalled, moving wildly against him as he reached his peak too. Fuck, he whispered. When Lawrence's orgasm released him, he collapsed back into the seat, chest heaving as he rolled his eyes up to the cowboy. The man's hat had tumbled from his head and Lawrence's rough grip had reddened his skin. His cock hadn't softened. The cowboy pulled out of him, relaxing on the other side of the bench seat and using his button-down shirt as a towel, wiping the sweat from his skin. He fastened his jeans and grabbed his hat before moving to the driver's seat. Lawrence only vaguely remembered the ride back to the cowboy's place. He drifted in and out of a pleasured, after-sex nap until the truck turned from the smooth highway onto a graveled street. Elijah hopped out of the truck and yanked open the back seat, dragging Lawrence to the edge of the cushions and peeling his pants all the way off. Lawrence groaned at his hungry touch, shaking off the haze of sleep. What is it? I want to go again. Where? Lawrence's cock leapt to attention, pleased by the idea despite the exhaustion setting in his bones. The cowboy glanced around before lifting Lawrence out of the truck and stretching him across the hood of his luxury sedan. Oh God. We could go inside, Lawrence shivered. His back arched and his toes curled, and his cock lying against his belly bubbled with pre-cum. Nah. Too many steps, and I want your ass right now. On the hood of my car. Yeah. A shiver raked up Lawrence's spine as the cold aluminum chilled his blazing skin. The gentle night breeze tickled the moist head of his cock and clammy skin, and the horses neighed in the distance. Chapter 12. They stumbled into the house after 2 rounds of rough outdoor fucking, and the cowboy snuck in one more orgasm before they collapsed into his bed and fell asleep. The cowboy held Lawrence close, both arms wrapped around his lean body. After a handful of orgasms, the cowboy slept 2 hours past his normal waking time and groaned, rubbing his forehead with his arm. Lawrence rolled over, nestling his head on Elijah's bicep and kissing his chest. "Good morning." "Hey," Elijah rumbled, flexing his arm and planting a kiss on Lawrence's cheek. "Is the food still in the truck?" Elijah chuckled. "No, I brought it in." "When?" "When you were asleep, obviously." Another lazy laugh. "It's late for you." Lawrence stretched and shifted positions, lying on his belly and propping his torso up with his elbows. "Yeah. I'll get up in a minute. The horses can wait a bit. They have plenty of food and water. I just need to check the fence and give them new bedding." "And work with them?" Lawrence lifted his dark eyebrows, scanning his emerald green eyes over Elijah's face. "Probably not today. I have to work on your car today, remember?" "Ah. Right. You can work with them. Molly, right?" "Yes, Molly." Elijah nodded. "Then you can work with her while I work on your car. Are you going to do rounds with me?" "I have to walk." Lawrence lifted his eyebrows. "Ha. Nah. You can ride if you want." Lawrence shivered in his arms. "Maybe a bit later." He chewed his bottom lip. "Ride the horse, sweetheart. What we need to do is get Molly in her halter and let her walk alongside Romeo while we do rounds." "Why?" "It helps her learn and gets her more used to what we need from her. A few more days of gentle training, and I bet you could get her in a saddle and take her for a short ride." "Really?" Lawrence's eyes brightened. "Yeah." Elijah rubbed the other man's shoulders before pushed himself up. "I'ma get breakfast started if you want a shower first." "Sure." Lawrence shuffled out of the bed, throwing the sheets aside as he stood up. Light bruises from the other day painted his skin, and his thick curls were wild around his face. Elijah pressed his lips together, drinking in Lawrence's bare skin. He remembered the night before, how he had the prim and proper rich man supine over the hood of his luxury sedan, how he deposited 2 loads of cum in his tight ass, and how he had licked pools of Lawrence's sticky cum off the man's belly. His mouth watered, and his raw cock begged for a morning session. Lawrence glanced over his shoulder, lifting his lips in a slick smile. "You can join me after you finish breakfast." "I might," the cowboy grunted, groping Lawrence's ass as he finally stood up. He reached between the man's slender thighs and cupped his hanging balls and half-erect cock. It hardened in his hands. Lawrence arched on his toes when the cowboy grabbed him. "You feel something you like?" "Yeah." Elijah squeezed him. "I'm thinking I might want something a little different for breakfast." Lawrence groaned, resting his head on his shoulders and exposing the slender column of his neck to the sky. He submitted to Elijah's playful treatment, inching his legs further apart. "What's that?" "You." Lawrence humped his hand. "Meet me in the shower then. Give me a few minutes." "All right." Elijah released his cock after a few lazy strokes, and Lawrence disappeared into the bathroom. The cowboy flopped back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. He closed his eyes as the water ran in the bathroom, joining Lawrence after 5 minutes. He tasted Lawrence's ass and sucked his cock down his throat, dragging an orgasm out of him, before exiting the bathroom and moving into the kitchen. The cowboy made his usual breakfast, boiling grits and scrambling eggs in a skillet. He ate as he cooked and fixed Lawrence's plate, leaving it on the counter for him. He slipped the new halter set over his gelding's nose and mounted the horse bareback as he waited for Lawrence to join him. The gelding warmed up, walking slow circles around the front of the pasture. When Lawrence joined them, Elijah dismounted the horse and assisted Lawrence in getting the mare bridled. They did their rounds on the back of the gelding, leading the mare beside the other mustang, walking the perimeter of the fence. When the morning chores were done, Elijah released the gelding and Lawrence gave the mare a break. The rich man answered emails and text messages as Elijah lifted the hood of the luxury sedan. "Do you think the sound of my phone will scare her?" Lawrence asked, leaning against the side of his sedan. Elijah worked under the hood of the vehicle. Dunno, but I wouldn't risk it. You expecting a call? No. I'm not. I'll leave it here. It's fine. Yeah. I'll let you know if you get a call or anything. Lawrence nodded. Okay. He handed Elijah his cell phone and hopped over the fence. Molly greeted him with a nicker. Armed with treats, Lawrence led the horse around until she relaxed. Then he worked with the blankets and saddle. Elijah alternated between working under the hood of the vehicle and watching Lawrence with the horse. He smiled, and his heart warmed as he watched Lawrence in the field. The horse adored him, and he was gentle and patient with her. When Lawrence had first arrived, he had been cold and stiff, but a caring person had replaced that person. The cowboy had liked Lawrence from the second he saw him, but now he adored him. He turned back to his work as Lawrence gave the horse a break, draining the oil out of the vehicle and working on the spark plugs. Lawrence's cell phone rang in his pocket. "Babe?" Elijah called. "Yes?" Lawrence had gotten the blanket and saddle on the horse's back. "Your phone's ringing." "Oh. I can't right now. I've got the saddle on her, and I may be able to fasten it too. What do you want me to do? Can you answer it? It's fine." "Yeah." Elijah rubbed his hands down his jeans, cleaning the grease from them, and dipped his hand in his pocket. He pulled out Lawrence's cell phone and answered it, nestling it between his shoulder and his ear. "Yeah," he grunted. "Hello, sir. This is John Campbell. I'm looking for Mr. Van Rensselaer." "Right." The cowboy cleared his throat. "He can't come to the phone right now. I can take a message." "Ah. You must be the squatter. He told me all about you." The stranger's voice warmed with recognition. "Right. You got a message for him, or what?" Elijah rumbled. "A short message. Can you let him know I got the building plans from the architect, and he can review them whenever he's ready. I can send digital copies to his email, if he wishes." The cowboy squeezed his eyes shut, growling. "Did you get the message?" "Yeah. I got it," Elijah replied, tone sharp and voice clipped. He ended the call and jammed the cell phone back in his pocket, taking in a deep breath. His vision blurred with anger, and he fumbled with the mechanics, but after a series of mistakes, he gave up. He tossed his tools, spooking Lawrence's horse. "Hey!" Lawrence exclaimed as the horse danced away from him, half strapped in her saddle. "What's wrong? Is it too hard to fix?" "No," Elijah growled. "Who's John Campbell?" Lawrence sealed his lips, approaching the edge of the pasture. Molly pranced farther away from Lawrence and propping her ears forward on her head. "Why does it matter?" "Oh, no reason. He gave me a message for you, though. He said he got your building plans from the architect." "Ah." Lawrence bit his bottom lip. "So you're still doing the vacation homes, huh?" He slammed the hood of the sedan down. "Hey." Lawrence scowled. "My vehicle. Don't do that. Answer my question. You're still doing the damn vacation homes. After everything? After all that fucking talk about boarding horses and everything? You thought I would miraculously cancel our plans because we had sex. No, but I figured you may consider it since you were the one going on about boarding horses. Okay, well. I'm sorry." "You're sorry? That's all you got? You're fucking sorry? I haven't decided what I want to do yet." "You haven't, fine. Okay. Fine. I'm weighing the pros and cons." "Whatever." Elijah deflated, twirling a wrench in his hand before dropping it in a tool bag on the ground. "I was trying to compromise. It's a lot of land." Elijah shook his head, squinting off into the distance as his eyes burned. Tears glossed his eyes, but he sucked them in before they fell down his cheeks. Lawrence's words stung, especially after the previous night, especially after this morning. Their sex had been wild and primal and passionate, something he never expected from the rich city boy, but he loved it. And the rich boy knew teasing. Like a mare in the field, he presented himself when he was willing and scorned Elijah when he was spent, kicking him out of the way. But Elijah only enjoyed that treatment in the bedroom. Outside of it, Lawrence's indecisions frustrated him. The cowboy had made his decision when the rich man first stepped out of his vehicle. Lawrence had woken something up inside of him when their eyes first met. Elijah knew Lawrence was the one. He had no doubts about it. Watching Lawrence with the horses confirmed it. The cowboy's anger evaporated as he watched the other man, studying the worldly innocence in Lawrence's eyes. "All right." He lifted the hood of the vehicle again and bent under it. You're not upset." Elijah sighed. "I love you." Lawrence blinked. "What?" "I love you," Elijah repeated, gripping the sides of the sedan and rolling his shoulders. "So, you do whatever you think is best for this land. It's yours, and I want you to be happy with your decision." "You what?" "You barely know me. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand love." Elijah abandoned the vehicle a second time and moved over to Lawrence, resting a hand on the back of his neck. "I never believed in love at first sight, or any of it until I met you. And these last few days with you have been great. Infuriating, but great. You piss me off, but I love every second of it, and I love everything about you." Lawrence worked his jaws, grinding his teeth against each other as Elijah spoke. "Even when I get up late. I make you breakfast every morning, don't I?" Elijah kissed Lawrence's temple. "Yes," he murmured. "Yeah. I'ma take a break for a minute." The cowboy stroked Lawrence's cheek and walked inside the house. Chapter 13. Lawrence spent the rest of Thursday in the pasture with his mare Molly, eyeballing the cowboy from afar. His confession had come as a surprise. The cowboy loved him. The knowledge of it thrilled Lawrence and unnerved him at the same time. He had done nothing to deserve an honest, good man's heart, especially knowing he wanted to turn beautiful land into vacation homes. His time with the cowboy had ended up as an unintentional break from society, and he realized he didn't miss it. He didn't miss the rush of cars and the constant time constraints. Lawrence didn't miss always having somewhere to be, and he didn't miss rushing around, dipping in and out of traffic to get to that place. Life with Elijah was different. It was relaxing and comforting, even though it lacked certain things he had become accustomed to. He had washed his own clothes Tuesday night with the cowboy lingering in the washroom as Lawrence pressed buttons on the washing machine and dryer. They made dinner together, too, and the cowboy was patient and understanding when it came to Lawrence's lack of experience in the kitchen. The honest truth was that he hadn't missed any of his old life. For the first time in his recent memories, he was happy. He was bursting with it, and when his contractor had called, it reminded him of all the lingering decisions he hadn't made. He was at war with himself. The vacation homes were easy and safe. His father would appreciate them, too. On the other hand, he could join forces with the cowboy and turn the little pasture into a thriving business. Lawrence had spent his life playing things safely, and safe had gotten him nowhere. Thursday night they danced around the kitchen, inching past each other and apologizing for even the lightest of touches. They managed dinner, but rather than retire to the bedroom together as they had done the previous night, the cowboy took the couch and left Lawrence to the bedroom. Without Elijah beside him, the bed was huge, and twinges of loneliness pierced his heart. The next morning was no different than all the other mornings, except that Elijah had added a note under his bowl of food. The note had only 3 words on it. "Your car's fixed." Now, his decision was imminent. He wasn't stuck here with the cowboy anymore, but he wished he was. Lawrence sank down at the table and stirred his food, taking tentative bites as his fingers slid over Elijah's scrawled handwriting. The cowboy's handwriting was a mirror image of him. It was a lazy cursive flowing seamlessly with rough edges. The letters dropped off with a natural confidence, the same confidence Elijah hid in his casual stride. Lawrence kissed Elijah's handwriting and pocketed the note next to his cell phone, scarfing down the rest of his breakfast. He dressed himself in one of Elijah's plaid shirts, his own designer jeans, and a pair of mud-covered tennis shoes, stepping outside to the harsh mid-morning sunlight and squinting his eyes. He hopped over the fence as his cell phone rang. Elijah's number flashed on the screen and Lawrence frowned, putting the cell phone to his ear. "Hello?" "Hey," Elijah panted, "you up?" "Yes. I was coming to the pasture now to work with Molly." "Yeah, I need you to load the truck up with some wood from the supply shed." "Can you do that?" I think so." "Yes, why?" "Good. My keys are on the counter in the house." You want me to drive the truck?" "Yeah. How else are you going to get the wood here?" "Listen. I can't discuss it right now. I need something else from you too." "Okay, what?" "I need you to call the vet. His name is Fairley. Chip Fairley." "Okay." Lawrence frowned, and his anxiety spiked when Elijah mentioned a veterinarian. The cowboy's tone had been serious, confident, but filtered with worry. "Lawrence?" "Yes?" "Thank you." The cowboy ended the call, and Lawrence hopped back over the fence. He struggled with the first planks of wood, dragging them from the shed to the truck before he moved the truck closer to the shed. He reversed the vehicle several times before he got it close enough to the shed for easy loading. When the vehicle was loaded, he slammed the rear door shut and called the veterinarian. His cell phone rang 3.5 times before someone answered. "Mr. Fairley speaking." "Hi, Mr. Chip Fairley. This is he," a southern twang colored his words. "Hi. My name is Lawrence, and I'm here with Elijah Coleman." "Ah. Elijah. The one with the wild mustangs. He already had me out for shots recently. What's going on?" "I'm not sure actually. He told me to call you. It sounded urgent." You don't have any more information than that?" "No." "Well, I believe the fence came down." "Ah. Oh, I bet someone's got a fractured leg," the veterinarian mused. "Can you come out here today?" "Well, this is an emergency, so it's going to be my emergency price, but yes, I can come out today." "How much is your emergency price?" $200 plus the cost of care. If it's a bad fracture, you ought to just put the horse down." "Excuse me?" "No, we're not putting any horses down." "Will you take a personal check for your payment?" "How does this work?" "I require payment at the time of services rendered, and there's no reimbursements if the animal dies while I'm treating it." "Of course." Lawrence wrinkled the bridge of his nose. "So, I will see you here shortly." "I'll be there in about 3 hours." "I see shortly is relative. We will see you when you arrive." Lawrence ended the call and hopped into the truck, calling Elijah again. "Where are you?" the rich man asked when Elijah answered the call. "Follow the fence going towards the left. If you unlatch the gate, the pasture'll swing open and you can get the truck all the way through." "Oh. Right." Lawrence jumped out of the truck and opened the fence. He drove through the pasture, easing over hills and matting the ground under him until he saw Elijah, Romeo, and the fallen fence. The cowboy sat straight-backed on his horse, blocking the exit. Lawrence counted 6 horses in the pasture. 7, if he counted Romeo. He didn't see Molly. He turned off the vehicle and jumped out of it, racing up to Elijah, who dismounted his horse. "What's going on?" "Fence broke." "I see." Lawrence wrung his fingers, scanning the area before coming back to Elijah. 3 horses are missing. You said you had 10, right?" "Yup." Elijah roped Romeo's lead around an intact part of the fence and moved his truck in front of the broken portion. Lawrence moved out of the way, standing on the left side of Elijah's gelding. What about the other three? What are we going to do? 2. Elijah unloaded the truck. We'll wrangle them up. What about the other one? Elijah stood straight up, fanning his face with his hat and looking at Lawrence. Called the vet for the third one. Tell me more information. Lawrence screwed up his features, glaring at the cowboy and scanning the area. His eyes darted around until he landed on his mare's familiar face. She was lying down and pain sparkled in her dark eyes. Lawrence's eyes widened and he approached the mare. What's wrong with her? Looks like she broke a leg. It's why I had to call the vet. But the vet said he'll be here in 3 hours. Will she be okay until then? Elijah cut his eyes to the horse and shrugged. She can't get any worse, so I'm sure she's fine. Ain't really worried about the next 3 hours. What do you mean? The cowboy wet his lips and started working on the fence, ripping off the broken planks and tossing them into the bed of the truck. He ignored Lawrence's question. Elijah. The cowboy curved his lips downward, wincing as Lawrence named him. What? What are you worried about? Depending on the fracture, we might have to put her down. Yeah, the vet said that too. We're not putting down any horses. It won't be my choice, love. It will be your choice. You can decide not to. Sometimes there's no point trying to get them up and recovered. Especially wild ones. It's easier on everyone if you just euthanize them. If it's a matter of money, I can pay it. I can pay any cost, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I know you can, but it's not about money. It's about prognosis. If she doesn't have high chances of making it, you're prolonging her pain, and then you have to be careful about pain medicine. I don't care, Elijah. She's my horse. Even if she has a 2% chance of living, I'm spending on her. The cowboy set his jaws. Fine, he muttered. Lawrence stroked the mare's nose, calming her with his voice as Elijah focused on the fence. An hour later, Lawrence coaxed the mare to her 3 working legs, and she hobbled through the fence before Elijah sealed it. 2 hours later, Elijah had wrangled the 2 missing horses, and he returned to Lawrence and Molly with the veterinarian walking behind him. The gray-haired man squinted as Elijah explained the situation. Elijah and Lawrence traded places as Mr. Fairley performed his examination. His frown grew deeper as he checked the horse, and he finally stood up, resting his hands on his hips. I got some bad news. He mopped his sweaty forehead. Elijah ducked his head, tipping his hat forward and shading his eyes. Okay? Lawrence prompted. It's a pretty bad fracture. The chances of her making a good recovery are slim if she's living a pasture life. She'd do better if she were boarded. We're not euthanizing her, so give me more options. Well, I'm going to have a full X-ray to see just how bad the fracture is. Looking at it out here, I'm planning for the worst. If you was budget conscious, I wouldn't suggest it. The man looked at Elijah, and the cowboy turned his head away. I'm not budget conscious, Lawrence confirmed. I want the X-rays. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. No guessing. Well, my X-ray equipment is in my car, but it'll push the price up. Mr. Fairley looked at Elijah again, and Elijah shrugged his shoulders. If he wants an X-ray, we're doing an X-ray. All right, then let me get my equipment. The man retreated, walking back to his vehicle on his own. Elijah approached Lawrence, squeezing his shoulders. You can get another horse, you know. I know, but I want this one. This is, Lawrence paused and squeezed his eyes shut. It hit him why this horse was so important. This horse was the answer to Elijah's gelding. The pair looked good alongside each other, with the mare a few hairs shorter than the male. The pair grazed together and relaxed together, and it was Lawrence's first horse, his opening to a new life with Elijah. I want this one. Elijah nodded, inhaling a deep breath. You're going to have to board her somewhere in town while she heals. Lawrence chewed his bottom lip. Yes. She means a lot to me, and so do you. The cowboy smiled. Okay. He kissed the top of Lawrence's head. The veterinarian returned with his equipment, further diagnosing the injury and referring them to the local equine center, frowning the whole time he called his colleagues and explained the situation. He ended the call and looked at Lawrence. "You're real lucky. Some fractures can't be repaired. This one's pretty bad, but we can do some metallic implants. I don't know how many though. The surgical team will brief you on it when you arrive." Lawrence nodded. "Thank you." He paid Mr. Fairley as Elijah hooked the trailer to his truck. With gentle coaxing, they loaded the horse inside. Elijah drove the truck, and Lawrence followed him to the equine center in his black sedan. Chapter 14. They arrived back at Elijah's log cabin the following morning, after overseeing the horse's vet care and securing a boarding place for her as well. Lawrence was on edge as they arrived home with one less family member, but Elijah was exhausted. The cowboy stumbled inside his place, kicking off his boots and collapsing on the couch, falling into a deep sleep as soon as he hit the pillow. He drifted in and out of a restless sleep until the early afternoon, waking with a jerk and bolting upright. Wide eyes scanned the area, and he swung his legs off the couch, jumping to his feet. He strained his ears for noise, but the house was still, and Lawrence's scattered things were gone. The cowboy sighed. It was bound to happen sooner or later. He sucked his teeth as he dunked his feet in his boots and propped his hat on his head, exiting his house and moving to the field. Without Lawrence's car occupying the driveway, the place was empty. It was void of the life Lawrence had given it. The bright summer hues dimmed as loss settled in Elijah's bones. Romeo nickered at the edge of the pasture, flaring his nostrils and tickling the cowboy's palm when he presented it. "Hey man," Elijah rumbled. "We're alone again." The gelding scented Elijah, inhaling and exhaling big puffs of breath, and the cowboy patted his thick neck, hooking his arm around it. "Yep. He's gone. Your girl'll be back though. She's boarded in the city after her accident," he explained. The horse didn't care, but Elijah's mood lifted as he talked to the animal. The gelding responded with soft noises. Elijah slipped the bridle over his head, hooking it behind his jawline. He laid a blanket over his back and the saddle afterwards, belting it under the animal's barrel chest. Then he kicked himself on the horse's back and started rounds. He mucked the open structures and laid new straw, filled the feeders, and observed the horses from afar. Without Lawrence, the place didn't bring him joy. He adored the horses and his profession, but Lawrence had stolen his heart. His mind floated back to their winding conversations and the odd things they had in common. His heart fluttered as he remembered Lawrence's endearing smile and the true joy the other man experienced while working with the mare. Sleeping with Lawrence had been the best night of his life, not because of how well they connected sexually, but because of because of how they laid in bed together talking until the early hours of the morning in between steamy sessions. Next to him, everything fell away. Elijah had drowned in his sparkling green eyes, in his Mona Lisa smile. He led the gelding back to the house as the sun faded behind a mass of trees, resting loose reins against his thighs. The gelding set his own pace, and Elijah responded to him, rocking his body to the horse's indolent stride. "Good work today, as always, bud." He removed the saddle and draped it across the fence as Romeo pulled his ears forward. The horse looked past Elijah, keeping his ears forward before turning one to the cowboy. "You hear something, huh?" The horse glanced at Elijah and returned his gaze to the street. The animal wasn't wrong, and when Elijah turned around, a familiar luxury sedan crawled up his driveway. A cargo truck followed the sedan with a built structure on the back of it. "What the fuck?" Elijah muttered. He unhooked the horse's bridle and patted his neck before jogging over to Lawrence's vehicle. The vehicle crawled to a stop, and Lawrence emerged wearing a two-piece suit. The top button of his shirt was open, exposing a peak of his collarbone and chest. His loafers crunched the gravel as he rocked on his heels, hiding his hands behind his back. "Hi," Lawrence greeted Elijah. "Thought you left." The rich man tipped his head down. "I did. I needed to make my decision, and I wasn't sure I could do it here." "Why not?" Elijah squinted. Because I didn't want my heart to eclipse my head. Huh. Then, I realized I didn't want to make decisions based on logic for the rest of my life. All right. So what then? Well, we have to go pick up Molly in the morning. I bought a pre-made barn for us, and I got you something. Hold up. Hang on. You bought a pre-made barn? Elijah's eyelids fluttered. His thick eyelashes tickled his cheeks as he reared his head back, staring at the delivery truck sighing behind his work vehicle. Correct? And it's not the surprise either. Okay. What's the surprise then? These? Lawrence produced a bouquet of roses from behind his back, all in sunset shades and cradled with healthy green leaves. Elijah's cheeks darkened. Oh. I love you too. Yeah? A slow smile spread across Elijah's face, and he pulled Lawrence into a kiss. He meshed their lips together and devoured him, exploring his mouth, raking his fingers through his dark curls, cupping his angular face. Elijah retreated, licking his lips. Do you like the flowers? I love them. Good. You should take them inside and put them in water, so they won't die. Yeah. I should. Elijah took the bouquet in his hands, scenting the fragrant flower petals. What about you? Oh, I've got to get them into the pasture so they can deliver our shed. So you're staying then? Elijah ventured, massaging the rose petals between his fingers. Yes. I'm staying, and we're going to turn this place into a boarding and training facility. Elijah smiled. Boarding and training. Yes. And I already have a list of clients you can call once the building is set up. Lawrence dug in his pocket, pulling out a folded scrap of paper. Here. I wrote down their names and numbers, but before we call them, we need to decide on our business plan and how you want to grow the place. How I want to grow it. Lawrence nodded. Yes. We need to discuss where you see yourself in the next 10 years, and then we can work towards it. So, where do you see yourself in the next 10 years? What do you want? Elijah took Lawrence's hand, kissing his knuckles. I'm going to take these inside. I'll be back in a second. Elijah carried the bouquet up to the house, tucking it under his arm as he walked. The cowboy grabbed an old, galvanized tin pitcher and filled it with water, dunking the flowers in it and resting it on the table. Their sweet aura spread through his kitchen as a smile spread across his face. He moved back to the entrance, standing in the doorframe as Lawrence directed the truck into the pasture. 6 months later. Lawrence leaned against the wooden fence posts with Molly on one side of him and Elijah on the other side. The cowboy squinted across the pasture before looking at the smaller man next to him. Ever thought about breeding, Molly? The rich man looked up, side-eyeing his horse before devoting his attention to Elijah. We don't have any male horses here, do we? I mean, we've got Romeo, but he's gelded. There's a couple others out there, but they're all gelded too. Okay, then why are you asking? Lawrence quirked an eyebrow. Had someone mention it? Mention what? Mention potentially being interested in a foal from Molly and the right stallion. Why? Lawrence lifted his eyebrows. Temperament, look, breed. Ah. And you would train the foal too? Eventually, yeah. I mean, for this client, they'd be waiting a good 3 or 4 years for a horse, but some people are willing to wait that long. In the lifespan of a horse, 3 or 4 years is nothing. How long do horses live? They can get up into their 30s. A mare who's known to foal can get a higher price too. We're not selling Molly. Elijah chuckled. I know, love, I'm just saying she'll be worth even more. You know, that net worth thing you're always talking about. Oh. Lawrence wrinkled his nose. Right. So, how do you breed horses anyway? There are 2 main ways. You could do artificial insemination or live cover. Live cover? Elijah cleared his throat, staring forward. Yup. What does that mean? Oh. Just like it sounds. Elijah shifted his position, cheeks darkening as he looked down at the ground before turning light brown eyes back to the pasture. An early autumn breeze billowed his plaid shirt, outlining his packed muscles. Lawrence's eyes floated from the cowboy to the horses grazing in the pasture. Oh. His cheeks flushed. I think I might need a demonstration. The cowboy cut his eyes to Lawrence, smirking. I guess I could give you that. Let me finish up out here, and then I'll walk you through the process. Lawrence's cheeks warmed even more, and he licked his lips. Right. What's left to do? Get everyone who's staying in the barn up for the night, is all. Elijah tipped his hat to Lawrence and pushed off the fence. Lawrence watched him work with the horses for a few minutes before undressing Molly and escaping inside. He changed clothes, stripping out of his work uniform and rinsing the dirt and sweat off his skin. He collapsed on the couch, opening his laptop over his legs and reviewing the monthly expense report. The cowboy joined him inside later, hanging his hat and kicking off his boots. His skin glistened in the dusty ochre light. You still wanting that demonstration? Elijah ripped his shirt off his body, exposing rippling abdominals and a dusting of curly black hair. Lawrence peered up from behind his laptop as Elijah opened his pants, fingers fumbling with the buttons and sliding the jeans halfway down his ass. Yes, he murmured. Elijah tipped his head towards the bedroom. Meet me in there. Oh. Okay. Lawrence's cock hardened in his lounge shorts. He closed his laptop and eased to his feet, tiptoeing from the living room back to their shared bedroom. He stripped out of his lounge clothes, leaving them in a pile on the floor. Elijah followed him, pausing in the doorway and crossing his arms over his chest. You're gonna have to get on all fours for this. Lawrence's breath hitched, and a shiver traveled through him, shaking his entire body as he climbed onto the bed. He placed his palms and knees in the bunch sheets. His rapidly hardening cock hung between his thighs, and his ass cheeks pulled away, exposing his hole. Like this? Yeah. You're the mayor, Elijah clarified as he kicked off the wall and approached the bed. In a live cover, there are 2 steps. The teasing and the act. Usually, you'll show a teasing stallion before the mating stallion. Why? To make sure she's ready for it. She'll do things like lean towards the stallion, raising up her tail, squatting, urinating, and winking. Winking? Yeah. Winking her clitoris. Lawrence rolled his eyes as his blush traveled down to his shoulders, painting them red. Goosebumps followed, and he shifted his position. Oh, okay. Yup. Elijah waited, lips curling away from his teeth and tongue tasting the air. He inhaled a deep breath. Lawrence dropped his head between his shoulders and closed his eyes, rubbing his cheek against his arm as he peered at Elijah. He stretched his back, leaning his torso towards the cowboy and clenching his hole. The cowboy grunted. You show the teaser until the mare exhibits strong signs of being ready. Lawrence turned his face away from Elijah as he clenched his hole again and arched his back, spreading his legs further apart. His stomach fluttered, and he exhaled a muffled moan into the bed. Once she's ready, the mating stallion will be allowed to approach her from the left side, then brought to her hindquarters once she's displaying signs of full acceptance. He can smell and taste and nuzzle her. Elijah touched Lawrence's thigh, stroking his fingers from his hip down his leg. Then he pressed his lips into the other man's ass, kissing and exploring warm skin, until he reached the center of Lawrence's body. Lawrence trembled under him, dropping his hips before propping them up again and lowering his shoulders to the bed. He presented his ass to Elijah as his fingers curled in the sheets. Elijah's tongue lapped over Lawrence's entrance, puckering his tongue and penetrating him with it. His strong hands gripped Lawrence's thighs, holding him in place as he explored him. Damn, Lawrence groaned, rubbing his face against the sheets. His cock leaked with precum, staining the bedsheets. The stallion isn't allowed to mount her until he's got a full erection. Elijah bit Lawrence's ass as he grabbed lubricant from the bedside table. He smeared it over Lawrence. But once he's ready and he enters the mare, he's going to thrust vigorously. He thumbed Lawrence's hole. Lawrence moaned, jerking the sheets. Okay. Okay. It's best to check and make sure he ejaculated inside her by observing his movements, or putting your hand on his penis to feel the pulses. Then when he's done, you have to separate them quickly, because mares like taking a parting shot. A parting shot? Lawrence panted. Yeah. They kick, the cowboy growled. His cock slid along Lawrence's thigh as he advanced on him. Elijah rubbed his throbbing cock against the other man's ass cheeks in entrance. He pushed inside him. The rich man exhaled in a moan followed by a heady chuckle. Oh. Be quick when you're done then. I want my parting shot.